He was beaten every day for being weak. Lo was an orphan, abandoned in a small village, so the older boys dumped all the hard work onto his shoulders. In this world, rankings determined who was strong and who was trash. But one day, right before his eyes, a giant island descended and destroyed everything he knew. Lo tried to run back, but when he arrived, all that remained was a massive crater in the ground. As he cried in despair, someone appeared behind him. It was Adol, the rank 1. He ordered the boy to leave, but Lo still wanted to understand what had happened. His will was so strong that a green power began to wrap around his body. Even Adol was shaken. In that moment, he understood. This boy would become monstrously powerful. After that day, Lo's training began. He was thrown off cliffs, used as bait for fish, dropped into freezing snow, and he swung his sword 1,000 times every single day. Because his prana was so high, he was destined to surpass every talent in this world. The story starts in small Tully village. Meanwhile, Lo was chopping wood with precision. He looked at the pile with satisfaction. A boy appeared asking him to sharpen a blade, and Lo agreed. Suddenly, a girl popped up and smacked the boy, startling him to the ground. Yuna complained, telling them to stop making Lo do all the work. The boy argued Lo looked free, but she said he just gets distracted easily. Yuna scolded her friend for using him like a tool. Lo claimed he didn't mind, but she vehemently disagreed. She admitted he was kind, but she was still worried. Suddenly, Yuna had an idea and smiled. She whispered to Lo about leaving the village, revealing she'd found a secret path. Just then, an old woman appeared, shouting at them to stop. Yuna's grandmother asked if they had forgotten the village rules forbidding them to leave. Yuna asked why. A man told Yuna to stop while the grandmother ordered her locked up. Yuna complained that it always ended this way. Then, the man asked Lo to help fetch water. Lo agreed immediately, surprising him. Yuna whined that she didn't want to do things with him anymore. Someone noted they were the only ones the same age, yet total opposites. He was asked if he wanted to rest and do his own thing. He said no, he would help. He remembered losing his parents early and being alone until the community took him in. He knew they looked after him so he wouldn't be lonely. He wanted to repay that kindness. He loved the village and everyone in it. The man cried and invited Lo to live with him, but the boy refused. He insisted the villagers mattered more to him than the outside world. Meanwhile, Yuna was trapped in a bamboo cage, screaming to be released. Her grandmother wished she behaved more like Lo. Yuna asked why they were never allowed to leave when merchants visited freely. She argued the world was vast and asked why they were confined. The grandmother revealed they were the target of someone's resentment. Surprised, Yuna asked who. The old woman said she didn't need to know. Time would resolve it one day. Meanwhile, Lo was drawing water from a well, noticing a strange red energy in the sky. He finished filling the buckets. Suddenly, something hit his head, confusing him. He looked around and saw Yuna peeking from behind a rock. He called out, but she shushed him. She pointed to herself, signaling a direction. He asked if she had escaped again. She replied that getting caught so often made escaping easy. He retorted that wasn't something to be proud of. With a mischievous smile, Yuna told him to follow. He looked surprised. He reminded her grandma would scold them, but she promised they'd be fine if it was quick. She looked him in the eye, saying she wanted to show him something. Curious, he followed. They walked through a sunlit forest trail. Suddenly, she pointed ahead. She announced they had arrived. His eyes widened. They stood at a cliff's edge, overlooking a vast valley and a bright blue river. Radiantly, she told him to look at the vast world. He was amazed, saying it was incredible. She smiled meaningfully and asked if he knew the rules of the outside world. Confused, he asked what rules. They sat reading a book she had secretly gotten from a merchant. She explained the ranking system classified people by profession. Everything was ranked. Weapons, food, wealth, leading to intense competition. He realized the outside world had its own rules. Excited, she declared she wanted to be a ranker adventurer. She wanted to travel, compete, and be admired. Determination reflected in his eyes, but he remembered the village rule. Annoyed, she said she didn't care. She was leaving. She extended her hand, inviting him on an adventure. She insisted he needed to go to the outside world. She asked if he remembered the giant bird attack when she was 5. He recalled protecting her with a stick, emitting a mysterious energy. She reminded him he had saved her that day. He asked if that really happened. Excited, she confirmed seeing green energy, while he wondered about a strange sound he had heard. She said she knew he had special power. When he tried, he was stronger than anyone. She extended her hand again, saying he would shine out there. She skipped away through a flower field. Lo stayed silent, then thanked her. However, he still loved the village and said he couldn't go. Irritated, she called him stubborn, hit him with a branch, and left. He told her to be safe, then watched her leave. He pondered her decision and the rankings. The sky turned blue, yellow and orange. He watched the sunset, then decided to return to the village. Suddenly, he noticed something strange in the sky. A huge floating object appeared on the horizon. It glowed with a blue aura, radiating strong energy. Eyes wide, he watched in confusion. The object fired a powerful beam at the ground. He covered his head as the beam hit the forest, causing a massive explosion. Stunned, he couldn't grasp what had happened. He ran desperately, wondering if the object was gone. Panic filled his face. He couldn't believe his eyes. He tried to convince himself everything was fine. He thought of Yuna and the villagers. He sprinted toward the village until he stopped at the edge of a massive hole. Terrified, he realized the village had been hit. A gigantic crater stretched out beneath an orange sky. It was unprecedented devastation. Heart racing, he stared in shock. He tried to tell himself it wasn't the village. Desperate, he screamed for Yuna, the grandmother, anyone alive. Memories flashed. Yuna smiling, promising to always be by his side. He remembered the villagers smiling, saying they were his family. He fell to his knees at the crater's edge, expression filled with pain. He asked why this happened. Through tears, he lamented that once again, he had only watched, unable to act. Angry, he cursed that it was too late again. A warrior appeared, looking at the crater. He approached the kneeling boy. Lo felt his presence. The warrior asked if he was a survivor of Tully village. Voice trembling, Lo confirmed. The man said it must be hard. He stated the island was gone. Confused, Lo asked what island. The man asked if he knew what that really was. Desperate, Lo grabbed the warrior, begging for answers about the village. Crying, he demanded to know what happened. The warrior, sweating and tense, handed Lo a note. He told him to give up on the village and go to the safe location indicated. Lo refused the vague answer, pointing at the destruction. Desperate, the warrior yelled that the village simply vanished, and this wasn't a world for kids. Crying, Lo begged for more. The man turned away, telling him to forget everything. Lo refused vehemently. He knew he had a special strength. A green aura enveloped him. With determination pulsing, he declared he would go to that island and bring everyone back, no matter the cost. As a child, Lo found himself in a scene of destruction. He remembered his parents dying in a landslide. In the darkness, he was alone, huddled in fear. Then, a hand reached out to comfort him in his helplessness. Soon, the villagers began to take care of him. Among them was Yuna, always smiling. She was always by his side, but everyone there was a good person who couldn't bear to see others suffer. Now, radiating a powerful energy, he declared he could never forget them. He then promised he would go to that island and bring everyone back. The warrior was surprised, questioning the amount of prana. He noticed the space around Lo was distorting. Prana, the mental energy of living beings, flowed intensely from him. It's a force everyone possesses, but few use it consciously. However, talented individuals can wield it intentionally. Though invisible, those with great power can make it visible. Furthermore, some races possess a special type of prana, and it is said that Lo's villagers are part of one such race. The warrior grumbled, recognizing him as the survivor of Babel. He then thought the boy would develop in a few years and wouldn't need protection. He braced himself as a thrown sword appeared and stuck into the ground. The warrior ordered him to take the sword and go to the island. He added that he would train him if he saw potential. At that moment, the boy showed surprise at the offer. Meanwhile, the warrior radiated a red aura and told him to attack as if to kill. Then, both prepared for the clash, enveloped in their auras. The young man charged at him with his sword. The blow was parried, and the warrior noted his opponent was still a novice with a sword. Even so, he felt immense pressure coming from him. However, he realized that the pressure was even greater than he had imagined. The wave of prana emanating from him was extraordinary. The warrior thought he was impressive. He then acknowledged that the boy was truly powerful. Then, a pillar of green energy erupted intensely, soaring into the sky. After that, he explained the place was called the Isle of Gods. Normally, it floated over the ocean, but it would rarely appear in different places, destroying everything. He confessed he tried to stop it, but the island escaped his control again. According to one theory, people caught in that light were taken to the Isle of Gods. So he asked if he would also be taken if he touched the light, but he was warned it was just a theory, and no one knew what would really happen. He then asked what he should do, and the warrior said there was a direct approach. He explained that he needed to be in the top 10 of the adventurer rankings. The boy repeated the words thoughtfully, adventurer rankings. He learned that adventurers were professionals who explored and developed unknown territories. The warrior continued, saying that among all the rankings, that one had the most participants, and its top 10 were true monsters. He learned that by reaching that position, he could go to the Isle of Gods. His hand clenched into a tight fist. Even so, The warrior revealed that the Isle of Gods was #1 on the dangerous zone's ranking, and few adventurers ever returned alive. He then asked if the boy was still serious about going. With determination, he answered yes. The warrior stared at him with an intense gaze. He agreed to train him for 1 year, teaching him only the art of the sword. He then offered his hand, explaining that the boy should use him as a stepping stone to climb the adventurer rankings on his own. Then, Adal introduced himself as humanity's strongest knight, #1 on the knight rankings. He asked for the boy's name, and he replied it was Lo. They shook hands, and Adal warned him the path wouldn't be easy. With a smile, he revealed that he was the first. At that instant, the young man's eyes filled with seriousness, as Adal finished his sentence. He was the only one to ever take him down with a single blow. Thus began a year of hellish training, with blisters popping on his hands and feet. Even with his muscles tearing, he continued to train non-stop. Still, he suffered from crushed bones. His body bled from all over as he fought tirelessly. After that, Adal never mentioned the Isle of Gods again, as if encouraging him to figure out the rest on his own, or give up. Even so, he believed the villagers had to be alive. That was all he could hold on to. He questioned why the village had vanished, and what that mysterious island truly was. Meanwhile, his shoes wore out from the intensity of his training. Soon he stood up, determined to find the truth. He swore he would climb the adventurer rankings. A year later, they stood together in a lush landscape. Adal asked if he was ready, and he replied that he had been for a long time. At that moment, his eyes showed great determination. Yuna once exclaimed she wanted to become a ranker adventurer. A long time ago, she had invited him to go on an adventure together. However, Yuna, who longed for the outside world, had disappeared, and now it was he who was setting out on a journey. He decided he would hold on to her dream for now. Adal then invited him to get going. He agreed with a serious nod. The knight noted that at 17, his disciple had grown a lot, and he replied that it was a real growth spurt. Thus began the adventure of the young warrior, disciple of humanity's strongest knight, on his way to the Isle of Gods. The map showed the kingdom of Balter and the small village of Tully. Soon after, the royal capital, Trakista, appeared as an impressive city. Right in the center, the local branch of the Bureau of Recognition stood as an imposing building. Inside, a girl slept on a desk, surrounded by piles of books. As time passed and the hour drew near, she remained in a deep sleep. Suddenly, she woke with a start, realizing she had overslept. In the hallway, a woman asked if she had spent the night studying the rankings again. She replied that she saw no problem with it, since she belonged to the Bureau of Recognition. In response, the woman emphasized that precisely because she worked in this sector and determined the rankings of so many people, she should take better care of her health. The young woman listened attentively to every word. After all, the Bureau of Recognition is a profession that evaluates skills and updates the rankings of talents around the world. Therefore, this role requires vast, specialized knowledge and fair decisions. To judge the superiority and inferiority of people, one must act with extreme seriousness. Moreover, the professionals in this field must undergo various evaluations themselves. In practice, it is one of the most difficult professions in the world, reserved only for those considered truly capable. Still, she stated that although she was already part of the bureau, she was just a low-level employee and needed to work her hardest to get promoted. The woman then asked what the young woman wanted to do, and she replied, lots of things. Going up the stairs, the older woman suggested becoming a ranker's agent to move up in the bureau. The younger one agreed, but said few caught her interest. The woman commented that she had high standards, but the young woman denied it, claiming that today's rankers were half-assed. She then exclaimed that, in the old days, the competition for the rankings was much fiercer. However, nowadays, the top spots were practically fixed, which made the presence of the Bureau of Recognition members feel meaningless. Still, she argued that the rankings only had value because they were constantly updated. Laughing at the situation, the woman asked if she was a ranking maniac, and the young woman confirmed it naturally, describing herself as a serious case. She then began to wonder if a rising star would ever appear, capable of completely overturning the current rankings. At that moment, the woman revealed, surprised, that perhaps that star was right there. Further on, a room full of people sat waiting on benches. Seeing the scene, the young woman asked if this was the third year of the adventurer rank registration exam, and if it was always this crowded. She was told that there were usually fewer people. In response, the other explained the increase might be related to the Azaban forest, which was recently added to the danger zone rankings about 2 months ago. Understanding, the young woman nodded, and the woman commented that this time there were many promising candidates. Pointing discreetly, she highlighted one man, mercenary ranker 753, Owl Darkus, leader of the Red Dragon Company, and also a high-level rookie blacksmith. Next, she pointed out another, Archer Ranker 402, Eddie Markman, a member of a renowned family of archers whose older brother held the 7th position in the rankings. Besides them, she mentioned other promising names, asking the young woman if she noticed the next person was a merchant ranker. Continuing, she also identified a knight ranker, a sailor ranker, and even a guide ranker. Impressed by the younger woman's observations, she explained naturally that she could identify someone's rank just by looking at them, as it was part of being in the Bureau of Recognition. She then explained that the Adventurer Ranker title was highly sought after for its convenience, and because it was essential for entering special territories, like the previously mentioned forest. At that moment, a man in a dark overcoat rang a bell. Seeing this, the woman instructed him to wait while she began the registration process. Without delay, he introduced himself, saying he had come to register for the rankings. She explained that the rankings were managed by the Bureau, and that although any member could update them, initial registration was only possible at the headquarters. Lo expressed interest in registering as an adventurer ranker, and she, seizing the opportunity, invited him to take the exam that was about to begin. With a direct yes, he confirmed. The clerk handed him the form, asking him to fill in his name and other details, and informed him that the exam fee was 3,000 del. Without hesitation, Lo handed the money to the woman. At that moment, the woman said everything was ready. The man thanked her and was instructed to wait in the room, as his exam number was 53. As he walked away, Lo and the young woman exchanged a brief glance. She then commented that there were still people who didn't know what the Bureau of Recognition was, and the other replied it had been a long time since she last had to explain. Then, the woman asked for help with the exam preparations. The young woman accepted, saying that working behind the scenes wasn't so bad sometimes. When asked if that was sarcasm, she assured her she was being serious. Standing before the candidates, the woman, now acting as an examiner, announced the start of the Adventurer Rank registration exam. She explained there would be 3 stages: a written exam, a practical exam, and a final one, whose format would be revealed at the appropriate time. She added that passing would depend on the total score, encouraging everyone not to give up even if one of the stages seemed difficult. She then declared the immediate start of the written test, and the candidates began to fill out their papers with concentration. A short while later, one student realized with surprise that the test was difficult and covered a variety of different topics. As soon as time was up, the examiner announced the end of the written exam. She informed them that the practical stage would take place in the forest in 2 hours, asking them to wait on site while the tests were graded. Immediately after, the assistant asked for help with the grading, and the examiner readily agreed to help. The two then sat at a table and began to review the piles of exams. Suddenly, the assistant's eyes widened as she came across one of the papers. She immediately recognized the handwriting of number 53 as Lo's, the one with the dead eyes. Startled, she was shocked by what she saw. She then noticed the test was completely wrong, with numerous failing marks. Despite the shock, she continued grading, reflecting on the disastrous performance before her. 2 hours later, the examiner addressed the students and announced the start of the practical test, revealing it would be a treasure hunt in the forest. She clarified that candidates had to collect the listed items to earn points, that fighting was prohibited, and that possession of an item went to whoever touched it first. Meanwhile, 2 men boasted about their skills with medicinal herbs and insects, confident in their chances. Soon after, the examiner officially declared the start of the second stage, and everyone bolted into the forest. Now among the trees, the assistant commented that she could finally rest a bit. A moment later, the examiner wondered how many would pass, and her colleague estimated that perhaps half of the participants would make it. Observing the students in action, she noted it was easier to assess their abilities while they were moving, and asked if anyone had caught the assistant's attention. With a slight sigh, the other lamented that no one had impressed her. Just then, a young man approached, asking if he was the first to return. Right after, Darkus revealed a Rigel stone in his hand, worth 120 points. Puzzled, the examiner asked if he was already done with the test, even with so much time left. He replied confidently that he would pass either way. The examiner had explained that more points would secure a higher rank, but he retorted that his focus was on being a mercenary, and he didn't care about his adventurer rank. Suddenly, Markman ran up to them, asking who had arrived first. He then presented a bird's tail feather, worth 180 points. The examiner confirmed its value, explaining it was from a common bird. At that moment, Darkus looked down on him, mocking his arrogance over a simple bird feather. Markman defended the feather, saying it belonged to a bird that flew silently at 500 km/h. Darkus sarcastically suggested he become a clown instead. Markman then challenged him, and the other accepted, while the assistant got excited and the examiner commented on the great pride of rankers. With that, someone took a firm step forward. The assistant was instantly surprised to hear the young man's question. Then, Darkus, Markman, and the examiner also showed surprise. Lo appeared, carrying a huge, slain brown bear. With his sword in hand, he approached, showing off the animal's carcass. The body was dead, and both the assistant and the examiner observed it closely. Lo then asked if he could turn in the whole bear, as he didn't know how to remove the gallbladder. Despite some hesitation, the examiner answered that yes, it was possible. Since the bear's gallbladder was worth 300 points, the other students began to wonder how he managed to kill the animal alone. At that moment, the assistant asked how he had recognized the creature as a brown bear, since his written exam had been a disaster. Lo explained that the animal often appeared near his village, which surprised the examiner when she heard where he was from. Meanwhile, the assistant wondered if anyone had seen the boy fight. A man from the crowd then claimed that he had, by chance, witnessed the fight up close. However, he said he couldn't be certain about what he saw. As he drew his sword to face the brown bear, the scene unfolded before everyone. In an instant, the animal was slain. At that moment, the assistant watched Lo, deep in thought. About an hour later, in an underground training area, the examiner questioned the students about what an adventurer should fear. She immediately answered her own question: magical beasts and humans themselves. She explained that an adventurer's mission is to explore unknown lands, entering unpopular territories. During these journeys, she added, threats included bandits and pirates, making power essential to overcome them. For this reason, she announced the final exam would be a mock battle, where students would compete against each other. She assured them the test was meant to evaluate individual skills, not just to win. Darkus understood that was why the details hadn't been revealed beforehand. Suddenly, a muscular man approached and challenged him to a fight. In a provocative tone, he reminded him that he had only picked up a rock in the previous exam and scoffed at his mercenary rank. Furious, the man shouted that Darkus didn't deserve to be third class and promised to crush him immediately. In response, he blocked the punch with his sword. With a swift strike, he sent his opponent to the ground. He then apologized to the examiner for losing his temper at the insult, and she decided to ignore the scene, as the aggressor had already failed. As the man was carried away, other students commented he was an idiot for trying to turn things around, since the third class was composed of monsters. At that moment, the examiner wondered where Darkus's real opponent was, while a voice supposed it was number 53. The assistant looked at Lo, deep in thought. At that moment, the examiner pondered the whereabouts of Darkus's opponent, while someone speculated it might be number 53. Just then, the assistant called out to the examiner, who asked what was wrong. Hesitantly, she asked if she could choose Lo's opponent, and the examiner, though surprised, agreed. Meanwhile, several battles were taking place simultaneously in the arena. A short while later, the examiner announced matchup B, featuring numbers 27 and 41. And then she also revealed the final challenger. Number 53 had been called. She explained that numbers 27 and 41 would form a team to face Lo. At that moment, Darkus questioned the seriousness of the decision, while Markman commented it had been a while since he'd been underestimated like that. The assistant then asked if she was sure about this choice, and the examiner replied that she probably was. With her eyes gleaming, the assistant looked at Lo. Finally, she thought that he was a monster, while the boy looked more than ready to fight. In the center of the arena, Lo prepared for combat against Darkus and Markman. From a distance, the professor and her assistant watched the fight intently. Holding his stance, the young man stood ready for action. Meanwhile, his two opponents positioned themselves side by side, equally ready to attack. Darkus, the leader of the Red Wolf Mercenary Company, struck an imposing pose. The previous year, his company had made a name for itself by defeating the Camorra Mafia. At the time, rumors claimed he had taken down 7 enemy leaders, including the mafia boss himself. His partner was the young master of the famous Markman family of archers. He had gained great notoriety thanks to his father's exceptional training, a man who once held the rank of the world's second-best archer. By age 5, the boy was already on the archer rankings, and his reputation was undeniable. Now, Lo faced the duo, watching their every move. To everyone present, he was still just an unknown young man. Then, the professor raised her hand, signaling the start of the fight. At the signal, the archer acted quickly and fired an arrow. However, his opponent dodged it with ease, the projectile grazing past his head. Meanwhile, Darkus charged forward decisively, and Lo matched his speed, moving with agility. Their swords then clashed with force, creating an intense flash of light. They began exchanging swift and precise blows, sending sparks flying. As the battle raged on, a spectator asked his friend if he could see anything, but the friend could only hear the sounds of the fight. With his eyes locked on his adversary, Lo remained completely focused. Attempting an offensive, Darkus lunged forward, but was surprised by the young swordsman's agile defense. In that instant, the mercenary leader showed his surprise at his opponent's speed. In response, the young man spun his body to deliver a counterattack. As he refocused his gaze, he noticed several arrows rapidly approaching. He then looked up, spotting the archer readying another attack. One of the arrows was sliced in midair with a precise swing of his sword. He then blocked and deflected all the others with firm, calculated movements. Witnessing the scene, nearby spectators were startled as the ground cracked from the impact. One of them, nearly hit, stood in shock. From above, Lo stared down his two opponents, who were preparing to continue the fight. It was then that Darkus commented that the swordsman must be a high-ranking knight, and the surprised archer stated he'd never seen anyone like him. In response, the young man asked if they were also affiliated with other rankings. The archer replied that he was 402nd on the archer rankings, and the mercenary leader added that he held the 753rd spot on the mercenary rankings. Hearing this, the young man simply said he understood as a green aura began to manifest around him. He then declared that if he defeated them, he would surely ascend to the triple-digit ranks. The emerald energy expanded around him, forcing the spectators to back away instinctively. Showing surprise, Markman reacted to the power manifesting before his eyes. Darkus was also shocked, feeling his opponent's intimidating presence grow suddenly. Seeing this, the assistant murmured, impressed that his prana was visible and of such magnitude. At that moment, the archer explained that the ranking wasn't tied solely to profession. He then repeated that he was 402nd on the archer rankings as he prepared another shot. Finally, he revealed that he also held the 78th spot on the sharpshooter rankings. In a matter of seconds, Markman was defeated. In that instant, Darkus watched Lo, who was still enveloped in his green aura, while the archer lay on the ground. Surprised, the mercenary stared at his opponent with wide eyes. Then, they faced each other in silence, swords raised and ready for another clash. While Lo maintained an intense gaze, fear began to show on Darkus's face. Then, the swordsman lunged at him with incredible speed. The blade stopped just an inch from his neck, causing him to scream out, "Wait!" With no other choice, Darkus dropped his sword and raised his hands in surrender. In a serious tone, he explained that he had to get to work, and passing out like his partner would be a huge problem. Hearing this, Lo stared at him for a moment. Then, he sheathed his sword and replied that he understood. Averting his gaze, the mercenary turned his head and thought to himself that this kid was a real monster. Meanwhile, Lo himself was lost in thought, questioning who he really was. Around them, the spectators were stunned. One commented that he had defeated 2 triple-digit rankers. The assistant also seemed amazed by what she had just witnessed. At that moment, the professor raised her hand and officially declared Lo the winner. She then turned to her assistant and asked where she was going, seeing her rush off. Running through the halls, the assistant reached a room full of monitors and began typing rapidly. Before her, the screen displayed the agency's exclusive database. Without wasting a moment, she searched for candidate number 53. The name quickly appeared, Lo Tully. Reviewing his information, she saw he was 17 with no registered ranking experience, concluding he likely lived in an isolated area. The search also confirmed he had no criminal record or any affiliation with a cult. Impressed, she exclaimed that this was a true find, amazed by the talent that had been hidden until now. She then ran out of the room without hesitation. Shouting Lo Tully's name, she desperately asked him to accept her as his exclusive agent. However, when she arrived, she realized he was already surrounded by other agents interested in signing him. With a frustrated sigh, she lamented that she was too late. Complaining, she said that exclusive offers should only be made after properly investigating a candidate's identity. Curious, Lo asked what exactly an exclusive ranking agent was. Running toward him, she enthusiastically replied, promising to explain everything. She said an exclusive agent is assigned to a ranker to update their personal ranking. She explained that normally, one has to wait for the agency to send an evaluator to process the update. However, with an exclusive agent, the ranking can be updated instantly. She added that this type of agent is especially valued by adventurers who are constantly traveling. Just then, she pulled something from her pocket. She revealed that recognition agents have an exclusive terminal, the rank Tel, with direct access to the latest information. She stressed that to climb the ranks efficiently, he should seriously consider hiring one. Reflecting for a moment, Lo considered the idea of climbing the ranks more efficiently. A moment later, he said he had one condition. Turning to the other agents, with the assistant by his side, he raised his voice. He asked if there was anyone there who could get him into the top 10 of the adventurer rankings. Faced with such a bold question, she and the other agents were all taken by surprise. As the agents whispered, they said the top 10 was reserved for true monsters. And despite Lo's sword skills, it just wasn't enough. Hearing their comments, he watched them in silence. The assistant, on the other hand, looked clearly upset. As he walked up the stairs to leave, she watched him intently. Suddenly, she shouted for him to wait and ran toward him. Soon, the two were walking side by side across the courtyard, heading for the building's exit. That's when she called him by name. Curiously, she asked why he wanted to reach the top 10 ranking. Without changing his tone, he replied, it was none of her business, keeping his steady pace. Still, she insisted, saying she would make it her business then. Determined, she declared herself his exclusive scout agent. Hearing this, he seemed annoyed at the idea of being guided to the top by her. He then said he didn't want to put a child in danger, which made her stop, shocked by his words. Indignant, she exclaimed that before being a child, she was a scout agent. And besides, she reminded him he was just a boy himself. However, she was even more surprised when he stated that even if she weren't a child, he wouldn't hire her anyway. He bluntly explained that he didn't want to involve others in his journey. At that moment, she stared at him intensely. She said there was something she needed to do. She revealed she had a mission to accomplish, even if it cost her her life. That's why she wanted to join him. They both stared at each other firmly. She showed her full determination. Meanwhile, he also reaffirmed his own resolve to go to the island and bring everyone back. Recognizing her feelings, Lo said that she too had something she needed to do. Side by side, they stood before the building, which stretched out in the background like a symbol of their new alliance. The assistant then held out her hand, promising to take him to the level of an elite ranker. He accepted the gesture and for the first time, revealed his full name, Lo Tully. The two shook hands firmly. Afterward, night fell on the city, illuminated by hundreds of lights shining under the dark sky. Inside the room, the space was tidy and glowed softly, with a wide view of the illuminated buildings. With a smile, she asked if he liked the place. She explained that she had rented the room for a few days for him to use as a temporary base. Seeing how well organized the place was, he praised her competence. Tossing her bag on the floor, she replied that it was nothing. However, upon learning there would be a 1-week trial period, her expression suddenly changed. Annoyed, she complained about the decision, while he casually apologized. As anger took over, she promised to prove her competence within the deadline, mimicking Lo's gesture of bowing. Without changing his tone, he replied that he was looking forward to it. Still annoyed, she asked him not to act like it wasn't his problem too. She then commented that he was extremely serious during combat, but outside of it, he always seemed spaced out. With a slight nod, he agreed, saying he heard that often. Suddenly, her pocket vibrated, drawing her attention to her device. Immediately, she took out the device and showed the screen to Lo, revealing the exam results were in. The screen displayed Lo Tully's new adventurer rank, 27/28th. With an excited smile, the assistant congratulated him on passing and asked if he was surprised by such an exceptional rank. Lo commented that he had expected a 3-digit rank. Curious, the assistant asked the reason for this expectation. He explained that he had faced 2 opponents with 3-digit ranks during the exam, which made her understand his logic. She then clarified that the adventurer ranking has many more participants, making it more competitive with stricter limits on advancement. Shortly after, the device beeped and revealed Lo's swordsmanship rank, 58th place. The assistant smiled and commented that rankings weren't limited to just professions and that his position was truly excellent. Lo, surprised, asked if it was really that impressive. She affirmed with conviction that this number represented the very essence of the talent their office valued so highly. Next, Lo wanted to know if his opponents also had other rankings besides adventurer. The assistant confirmed and showed him the data on her device. On the screen, Owl Darkus's various rankings appeared, covering categories like hand-to-hand combat, siege tactics, and endurance. Then, she displayed Eddie Markman's multiple rankings, including sharpshooter, firing speed, and visual acuity. She explained that it's possible to have rankings in various categories, and suggested Lo also register in other areas to get more jobs. However, he replied coldly that he wasn't interested in getting work. Smiling lightly, the assistant said that even in a short time, she was already starting to understand his ways. She deduced that Lo wanted to reach the top 10 of the adventurer ranking by the fastest route possible. Seriously, she added, he wanted to go to the Isle of Gods. Lo stared at her in silence, his expression serious. Then he asked how she knew that. She explained that this was the special privilege reserved for the top 10 rankers, and that was why she had questioned him after the test. Lo just agreed with a slight nod. In response, The assistant stated that, in return, she would also reveal her personal situation when the time was right. Lo agreed that would be fair for both of them. However, she commented that her situation wasn't easy to explain to someone newly registered. Lowering her voice slightly, she revealed that what she sought was the darkness of the rankings. Lo raised an eyebrow, questioning what she meant by that, but the assistant quickly changed the subject, saying it was nothing important. She then turned to him with curiosity. She wanted to know where all his power and sword skill came from. Calmly, Lo revealed that he had become the disciple of a knight named Adol a year ago. The information stunned the assistant. She grabbed Lo's shoulders and began to shake him, asking if he meant Adol, the #1 ranked knight. Lo simply confirmed. The assistant's eyes widened, surprised that he had been Adol's disciple for only a year, and yet showed such coolness. She mentioned that Adol was famous for never teaching swordsmanship to anyone, despite receiving hundreds of requests. She added that there were rumors he intended to pass on his legacy to the next #1 knight in the rankings, which motivated many to train endlessly to reach him. Shocked, she concluded that Lo was the chosen heir. She stated that if the other knights knew about this, they would probably faint. Casually, Lo asked if Adol was really that amazing. The assistant answered without hesitation. Adol was considered the strongest swordsman in the world. Lo then stated calmly that he had cut him with his sword. Incredulous, the assistant said that was impossible. Confused and stunned, she decided to check the data one more time. The device showed the name Tully, recently registered in the database. As she analyzed the data, Lo remained silent, just watching. Then, a flashback began. Adol was asking Lo for his last name. Lo, confused, said he didn't know what that meant. Adol then instructed him to adopt the name Lo Tully if he really wanted to reach the Isle of Gods by the shortest path. Adol added that the risk was high, but if everything went well, they could obtain precious clues. Lo watched him with silent attention. They were both in a circular structure, likely a hidden training ground. Lo stated that he understood the mission. Back in the present, the assistant stared at Lo firmly. She stated that Tully didn't seem like just any pseudonym. With a hand closed over his chest, Lo declared that Tully was the name of his precious family. The assistant smiled, understanding and thanking him for sharing something so personal. Afterward, Lo suggested they rest for the day, as her duties as a scout agent were over. Without a word, the assistant took off her hat. Surprised, Lo watched her in silence. His eyes wide, he asked if she was a girl. Confused, she replied with a, "Huh?" Astonished, she asked if he had only just now realized it. Lo apologized sincerely. She clutched her hat in frustration, not knowing whether to laugh or scream. Finally, she thought to herself, frustrated, "Is that all he has to say?" Just then, a carriage stopped on a quiet city street. Inside the house, the assistant sat reading a newspaper in the sunlight. As she read on, her expression grew more and more surprised. Soon after, she greeted Lo as he came down the stairs, noting he was up early. In response, he just stared at her with a serious expression. He then mumbled something about getting water, but she cut him off, questioning him in confusion. Still, he replied it was nothing and greeted her, and she wished him a good morning back. Next, she tied up her hair and suggested they go get some coffee. He then lightly touched his hat, thinking it would be a long journey, but acknowledging this was just the first step. Excited, she proposed a strategy meeting to help him get into the adventurer rankings. Later, at a cafe, she explained that to climb the ranks, he would need achievements. She mentioned that land development or exploration were basic tasks, recommending he take on quests for now. As she spoke, he listened intently. She explained that many people depended on an adventurer's strength, and that quests offered ideal rewards for beginners. Then, she showed him a device, explaining that with it, he could easily find quests. Finding the device convenient, he listened as she offered to be his exclusive agent, but he replied that he'd think about it. He then asked if there were any quests that could raise his rank quickly. She explained that the high difficulty ones, assigned by the Bureau, were the most effective. Without hesitation, he chose the mission at the top of the list. The assistant read it aloud: retrieve a hidden treasure from an underwater temple located in a rank 7 danger zone. Astonished, she exclaimed that it was impossible for him right now, but he countered, saying he wouldn't know until he tried. Annoyed, she retorted that she already knew, without him having to try. She then insisted he trust the eyes of a reconnaissance agent, stating that the mission was too difficult and he would die before he could even rank up. Despite the warning, he asked to try anyway and questioned if the Isle of Gods was the rank 1 danger zone. Staring at her with determination, he stated that he couldn't back down. At this, she felt frustrated, thinking he was even more stubborn than she'd imagined. She knew she had to persuade him somehow. Suddenly, a man approached them, smiling, and asked if they were in trouble. In that moment, the assistant recognized him as Loud. He greeted her, saying it had been a while. Curious, Lo asked who he was. She offered to introduce them, revealing his full name, Loud Blowerword. She quickly explained that he was a formidable individual, ranked 11th among all adventurers. Surprised, he repeated, 11th, with a serious look. Meanwhile, in his mind, he recalled that adventurers were the most numerous in the rankings, and the best among them were true monsters. He reflected that this man was one of those monsters, a high-ranking adventurer. Finally, he concluded that if Loud was 11th, with just one more level up, he could challenge the Isle of Gods. Seizing the opportunity, the assistant asked Loud for a favor, and he promptly asked what it was. With a glint in her eye, she pointed at Lo and asked him to defeat him. Soon after, the two met in a large arena. Loud arrived shortly after, apologizing for the wait as he was watched closely. Remarking that he hadn't expected a duel, he picked up a borrowed weapon, a light spear, but one he deemed sufficient. At that moment, Lo formally introduced himself. However, Loud replied that he was clumsy with formalities, saying etiquette didn't matter in the adventurer rankings. Loud then mentioned that the assistant had updated his rank before and praised her, saying she was incredible. He continued his praise, highlighting not only her vast knowledge, but also her passion for creating accurate rankings, a rare trait among agents. At this, she blushed slightly, realizing he wanted to help her as much as he could. As he swung the spear, he pondered her request to teach Lo a lesson, sensing there was a certain care involved. Meanwhile, the boy watched him closely, feeling he could sense his strength just by looking at him. The aura around Loud radiated power, and Lo felt as if the slightest movement would get him pierced by the spear. Worried, the assistant called out to him with a distressed expression. She then declared with determination that this was a good chance for him to learn about the vastness of the world. Hearing this, he looked at her seriously, taking in her words. He then grew thoughtful, wondering if this was really about vastness. At that same moment, he remembered what had happened to his village. Engulfed by an intense aura, he declared that he already knew about vastness. In that instant, a screen appeared, announcing the duel between Lo Tully, ranked 27-28th, and Loud Blowerword, ranked 11th. Excited, the assistant shouted for the duel to begin. Immediately after, the two clashed in a confrontation of sword and spear. Preparing for the attack, Lo channeled prana into his armor and delivered a high-impact strike. As he defended himself, Loud suspected that Lo was increasing his agility by channeling prana into his hands and feet. Still, he thought that this style of swordsmanship couldn't be his own. He recalled that the Sword Saint's technique was passed down to only one successor, making it impossible for the boy to have learned such a secret skill. The next instant, he was attacked from behind, forcing him to snap out of his thoughts. They clashed once more, with Loud managing to block the blow. Then, he smiled and commented that he was quite relaxed. Lo gritted his teeth, intensifying the exchange of powerful blows. During the fight, Loud realized his opponent's prana was greater than his own and had an unusual glow, so he leaped back to create some distance. Watching the movement, Lo showed his confusion. At that moment, Loud questioned him about his race, only to get a question in return. He stated that Lo couldn't feign ignorance, as that glow wasn't something acquired later in life. Spinning his spear, he declared that he would make him talk if he remained silent. Right after, he slammed the weapon into the ground with force. Next, he asked if he could also use enchantments. Lo looked at him, surprised by the question. Then, Loud began an enchantment, chanting about a horse galloping fiercely and catching its breath as it crossed mountains. His aura intensified into a golden glow. All around them, countless swords emerged from the ground as he continued his recitation, describing a paulownia tree and the water's surface. Finishing with a prayer for peace in a leap, he revealed it to be an enchantment of the Windblocker tribe. The assistant, distressed, called out to Lo, urging him to use his own as well. His opponent stared at him firmly and warned that if he didn't, he would die. Finally, Lo looked at him with a serious gaze. Lo prepared to face the energy swords hurtling toward him as the assistant watched closely. Then, Loud adjusted his glasses, his gaze sharp and concentrated. Surprised, the boy realized this was something unusual. Then, his opponent raised his spear, impressively materializing the swords around him. He then unleashed a powerful blast of energy right at him. Despite the onslaught, Lo managed to fend off the barrage of attacks with his sword, but his opponent declared that a common weapon shouldn't be able to block such an enchantment. Then, he snapped his fingers confidently, and just like that, the boy found himself completely surrounded by countless energy swords. Still, he continued to dodge and defend with great agility. The confrontation ended with Loud still standing, while Lo lay on the ground. Despite this, Lo faced the situation with a serious and determined gaze. Soon after, Adal approached and explained that the boy still struggled to use prana. He added, however, that in time, he would master the techniques. Curious, Lo asked what exactly these techniques were. In response, Adal told him to watch closely as his sword began to radiate a red aura. He then announced he would show him the simplest technique first. At that moment, the boy's sword flared with a brilliant blue light, activating the lightning blade technique. He then lunged at Loud, who recognized the approach as a gale force technique. His opponent noted the attack's speed and made a brief comment. He quickly blocked the strike with his spear, using the weapon itself to form a shield. Meanwhile, the boy pressed forward, his sword moving at incredible speed. Then, the other man summoned small golden swords around himself. With them, he charged forward, brandishing several lances of energy. The two then clashed violently. Loud dodged the attack at the last second, recognizing a lightning-fast slash invisible to the naked eye. He then hurled his spear at his opponent. Even so, the boy managed to block it with his sword, but the impact sent him flying backward. The force of the blow launched him high into the air. Moments later, he lay on the ground, his face etched with exhaustion. Loud stood over him, praising his performance. Still, he snapped his fingers again and commented that the barrier between them was still too high. The assistant and the boy stared in shock at the glowing swords surrounding him. Surprised, she grew uneasy at the sight. He too was stunned as he realized the gravity of the situation. At that moment, Loud raised his hand, warning them not to underestimate the adventurer rankings. Immediately after, the golden swords rained down on him relentlessly. An explosion of energy and dust erupted from the point of impact. When the dust settled, it revealed the boy lying in a crater, pinned down by the swords embedded in the ground around him. The match was declared over. Loud was the victor, holding his rank as number 11. The warrior asked the assistant if she was satisfied. She thanked him. He remarked that the boy surely understood now, and Loud agreed. His gaze fell upon the figure lying on the ground. Then he asked if she had really believed he could win. The assistant replied that she had only thought it might be possible. He then asked if her belief was based on the fact that the boy was Adal's disciple. She confirmed he had guessed right. Finally, Loud explained that he recognized the high-speed sword technique as the style of the Sword Saint. Loud wondered if that could be right. The Sword Saint's style was the most powerful form of swordsmanship, passed down through generations to a single successor among the Rancor Knights. He concluded it was strange for a mere adventurer to have inherited it, as if he'd stolen a sacred treasure from a true knight. The assistant agreed and decided she would have to keep low from crossing paths with any of them. Loud affirmed that would be wise, since such an encounter could cost the boy his life. She reflected that if he conducted himself like a true Rancor knight, perhaps things would resolve without major issues. With a thoughtful expression, she concluded there was something Lo needed to accomplish, something he considered essential, even if it seemed impossible. It was then that the assistant revealed the real reason she had believed in him, regardless of his inherited style. She explained it was because Lo claimed to have landed a hit on a doll, a revelation that astonished Loud. While it seemed unlikely he could pull off such a feat at his current level, she admitted he didn't seem like the type to lie. Loud agreed, thinking there must have been some special circumstance behind it. He reflected that while the boy's style was impressive, what truly caught his attention was the energy contained within his prana. Just then, the assistant called out to him. He gripped his spear and concluded that Lo was likely capable of using enchantments as well. And he thought that if Lo had used them during their fight, the outcome might have been very different. Under the sunlight, a girl was in the kitchen. While stirring something, she hummed a soft melody. With a serene face, she seemed lost in thought. Suddenly, an older woman scolded her, asking what she was humming. Indignant, she called her a fool and explained that the song kept them from leaving. She then forbade the young woman from singing it again, demanding she understand the gravity of the situation. With a saddened expression, the girl remained silent. Soon after, her eyes closed in an expression of anguish. At that moment, a hand reached out and a voice apologized to Lo. At the same time, his eyes opened. Covered in bandages, he was lying in a bed. Confused, he asked where he was. Surprised, the assistant asked if he had finally woken up. She then explained he was in the infirmary of the reconnaissance agency and that he had slept the entire day. In disbelief, Lo asked if he had really slept all day. With a slight smile, she confirmed, saying he was out like a light. Finally, she revealed that the doctor suspected accumulated mental fatigue and asked if he wasn't rushing things too much. Looking to the side, he remained silent. The image of his body, fallen under a rain of spears, flashed through his mind. Reflecting, he admitted she might be right. Watching him thoughtfully, the assistant approached. Gently touching the bed, she revealed she had something important to tell him. Curiously, she asked if he knew what incantations were. With a surprised expression, Lo said he didn't. She then explained that incantations are a special use of prana, exclusive to certain races and highly valued by the best warriors. Wanting to know more, he asked if Loud was one of them. She confirmed, revealing he was a warrior from the Blower Ward tribe. She then described the tribe as skilled hunters living in the southern swamps. She added that incantations are passed down orally in the form of poems among the tribes. That's why they are called that. Continuing, she clarified that due to a genetic component, it's difficult to acquire them later in life. Then, she mentioned that Loud had commented that Lo also seemed to possess incantations. With that, she asked if he had any idea about it. Thoughtfully, his eyes widened. At that moment, the image of the girl humming in her kitchen appeared in his mind. With a slight nod, he answered yes. Beaming, the assistant expressed her joy. Excitedly, she shouted that incantations were a huge asset and that he could become an elite ranker. Right after, she showed him her phone, saying she'd found the perfect mission for him. On the screen was the investigation mission for the Azaban Forest, a danger zone ranked 48th. Intrigued, he asked if it was just an ecological survey. She confirmed, but with a worrying catch. She revealed that people were disappearing in that forest, including high-ranking adventurers who vanished without a trace. She also explained that if he discovered the cause, he could easily climb 200 ranks, though the risk was considerably higher. Without hesitation, Lo stated he would accept the mission. He then asked if she had suggested it because she believed in his ability. With a sincere smile, she replied, "Of course." Then, the excited assistant said they needed to go through the acceptance procedures. She then warned that Azaban Forest had animals protected from hunting and restricted areas, advising Lo to be careful even with his authorized presence. Curious, he questioned what would happen if he didn't follow the rules. Seriously, she answered that his ranking would drop. Next, she explained that failures or damages directly affected an adventurer's reputation, as the ranking reflected their credibility. With that, he understood the importance of following the guidelines. Then, she accepted the mission through her phone. Afterward, she celebrated the choice, stating this was the mission that would mark the start of Lo's new journey and the first step to skyrocketing in the ranks. Still excited, she encouraged him, saying they would do their best together. At this, he smiled slightly, agreeing with her. Meanwhile, in a distant place, the Azaban Forest revealed itself with its purple trees and mountains in the distance. Amidst the purple mist, a man walked slowly through the woods. Coldly, he held another by the neck and said there was no undoing what had been seen. Then, he indifferently asked if he had killed him again, stating that the agency didn't care about low-ranking adventurers. Next, he closed a cage with his foot, as if nothing mattered. Inside it, a white wolf with a horn remained trapped, as the man thought it was foolish to try to climb the ranks honestly. Watching the animal closely, he calculated that selling the horn of that Unihorosero would quickly get him into the triple-digit ranks. The Unihorosero, in turn, stared at him with sharp yellow eyes. At that moment, a mysterious figure commented that strength alone wasn't enough to raise an adventurer's rank. In response, Rosso Cruel, a rank 7 smuggler, stated that he existed for those who suffered from such injustices. Meanwhile, Dalkin Iris, with his back to everyone, reflected that he would never give up a good hunting ground like this one. Right after, he raised his arms confidently, declaring he would reach the top 100. He, a rank 672 adventurer, wore a determined smile. So, Lo and the assistant walked together toward the entrance of a forest protected by a fence. As they approach, he hands a document to one of the guards and asks them to check his rank. After confirming the adventurer's rank is 27/28th, the guard authorizes his entry. As they walk, he asks how many adventurers there are, and she replies that there are about 30,000. She then explains to her companion that the adventurer ranking has a completely different level of difficulty. Furthermore, the assistant explains that a 4-digit adventurer here is equivalent to a 3-digit one in other rankings. Therefore, she emphasizes how high the quality of participants is in this ranking system. Finally, the explanation ends with the statement that a 3-digit adventurer would be more skilled than the opponents from the exam. Reflecting on this, the young man realizes the required level is indeed high. Faced with this realization, the assistant looks at him before they proceed. With an excited gesture, she declares that the adventure can finally begin. Soon, the two enter the Azaban Forest, identified as the 48th danger zone. Noticing her companion has stopped, The assistant asks what's wrong. Immediately, he states that this is no ordinary forest. Confirming, the young woman says that he's noticed the difference. Next, she explains that a skilled adventurer can identify a place's danger just by looking. She adds that the danger zone ranking was created because ordinary people would have no way of knowing. Suddenly, her gaze shifts to the side. Then, she begins to explain that the Azaban forest was added to the ranking 2 months ago for a simple reason. At that moment, a massive outbreak of monsters appears before them. The assistant takes cover behind the warrior, asking for protection, while he tells her to leave it to him. With that, the young man advances and attacks the creatures with his sword. Just then, a winged monster swoops down to attack him from above. Quickly, he turns and intercepts the creature with a sword strike. After that, he leaps toward other insectoid monsters to continue the fight. With a single sword strike, he defeats the remaining monsters. Right after, his companion asks if the technique he used was taught by a doll, and he confirms it was. He explains that he learned several techniques from a doll but can't use most of them yet, though he believes he's close to mastering the second one. At that moment, a huge Brad orc, rank 126, appears before them. The creature then roars at the two of them. Facing the threat, the adventurer decides it's time to test his new technique. He then advances toward the orc while channeling the energy of his technique, the mid-path. Then, he announces the skill's name, Lotus Flower. With that, he unleashes a cross slash that hits the orc head-on. The blow strikes the creature's chest, which remains standing as the energy dissipates. He observes the result of his attack. Beside him, the assistant watches the scene with her hands raised. When the orc charges to attack, the young man grabs his companion and flees, admitting his technique failed. He justifies himself, saying he thought it would work, and the girl reminds him of his duty to protect her. As they run, she warns him they are approaching a cliff. At that moment, he holds her tightly and tells her they're going to jump. Immediately, he leaps from the cliff, taking the assistant with him. Thus, the two fall at high speed toward the bottom of the ravine. During the free fall, he keeps her safe in his arms. Then, the adventurer uses the branches of a large tree to break their fall and land on the ground. After landing, the assistant is completely dizzy from the maneuver. Then, he sighs in relief, and his companion scolds him for not warning her about the plan in advance. In a sincere tone, he apologizes, explaining it became a habit from Adol's training, and she questions what kind of training that was. Without answering, the young man just looks away. Upon reaching a new clearing, he observes the surroundings. The assistant then points excitedly, revealing they've luckily reached the target research area. Next, she explains that the ecosystem survey had to be redone, and that 20% was still pending. She then reveals that the remaining part of the survey is exactly where they are, finishing by explaining this is where the major monster outbreak occurred. At that moment, a deer with large antlers is seen drinking water from a stream. Noticing her companion's silence, the assistant calls out to him. He then comments that the local plants and animals are all unknown to him. At this, the young man looks at the forest and concludes that this is a real adventure. At this moment, he recalls when Yuna invited him on an adventure. Thus, he reflects on the journey Yuna so desperately wanted. Back in the present, a noise in the bushes catches their attention. As he starts to move, the assistant stops him and asks him to wait. At that moment, a white magical beast emerges from the bushes, and the young woman begins to identify it. As the creature passes by them, the assistant holds out her hand to stop it. He then asks if he should defeat the beast, but she immediately says no while looking at a device. Soon after, she identifies the creature as a royal horn, and reports that it's a rare rank 4 species on the brink of extinction. Noticing the wound on the animal's paw, she kneels down to tend to it. He asks if his companion knows how to treat it, and the assistant confirms, recalling that she learned basic medicine for rankers. She then suggests they set up camp there, as she, an appraiser, cannot abandon the creature. Faced with the proposal, the young man simply agrees with the decision. The young woman then justifies that protecting the royal horn is part of the ecological survey, and he states that he understands. Later that night, they camp around a bonfire. Near the fire, the assistant sleeps beside the royal horn. Away from the camp, the warrior trains alone in the middle of the forest. While holding his sword, he prepares to execute the middle technique. Then, he practices the lotus strike on a tree. The energy from his sword strike hits the trunk hard. After training, he concludes that his effort is useless. With that, he throws himself exhausted onto the grass with his sword at his side. Lying down, he looks up as he reflects. In his memory, he fought another, more powerful warrior who used a spear arts Zen technique. Back in the present, he admits he was completely powerless in that fight. While watching butterflies, he thinks he can't go to the Isle of Gods in his current state. With that, he reaches out his hand and decides he needs to become stronger. Right after, he sits on the ground, thoughtful. At that moment, he remembers the assistant saying that Lord Loud mentioned he also possessed an art. Sitting in meditation, he reflects on the idea of having an art. Suddenly, he is awakened from his thoughts while resting. As he gets up, he asks the assistant what's happening. She then explains that the creature suddenly started to get agitated. The royal horn growls and takes an aggressive stance. He observes that the animal seems better, and the assistant explains its recovery is fast with the right treatment. She then comments that the beast's distrust suggests the wound was caused by a human. At this, the young man questions if the one responsible for the attack was really a human. In response, the young woman asks him to look closely at the creature's horn. She shows the chipped parts and concludes that the beast was attacked by a poacher. Finally, she explains that the animal's horn is a panacea, which is why it was captured en masse until it became rare. Furthermore, she continues, even with the ban, they are still poached and sold in the underworld as unicorns. Suddenly, the royal horn charges aggressively at the assistant. Quickly, the young man positions himself in front of her, blocking the creature's attack with his sword. After the animal flees through the forest, the young woman protests. He realizes he scared it, while his companion decides to pursue it, as it hasn't fully recovered yet. While getting ready, she explains that pursuing the creature is part of the ecological survey itself, since its presence was unknown. Fully prepared, the swordsman announces he will go on ahead. Seeing him leave, the assistant warns him from a distance to be careful, as there might be poachers in the forest. At this, he stops and asks what he should do if he finds one. He then asks if his ranking will increase if he defeats them. The young woman replies that, depending on the opponent's capabilities, it's a possibility. Hearing her answer, he plants his foot firmly on the ground and says he understands. With that, he propels his body forward, declaring he will defeat as many as he can. Then, he runs at high speed through the forest. The assistant observes his speed and quickly loses sight of him. As he moves forward, he follows the trail the creature left behind. Suddenly, he is forced to dodge an arrow. Right after, he lands on the ground as the projectile embeds itself in the earth in front of him. An opponent then appears and warns him about his bad luck, calling him a poacher. Next, the man charges to attack, saying he's in a bad mood. Their swords clash, causing a great collision of energy between them. During the clash, the enemy questions the color of the energy he sees. Unexpectedly, the swordsman stops the attack and asks him to wait. Hearing the voice, the young man recognizes his opponent. With that, the other one lowers his guard and stands still before him. At that moment, he notices an archer positioned in a nearby tree. Not understanding the situation, he asks who that person was. Then, the archer shouts the name Eddie, and the swordsman replies Owl, revealing their identities. The day after the adventurer registration exam, everyone gathered at the guild. Inside the main hall, several members were waiting in groups. Meanwhile, Darkus approaches the counter to accept a quest, and the receptionist asks about the desired rank. Before he could answer, Markman rushes over to greet him. The archer then comes to the counter and declares he's also there to pick up a quest. For a moment, the two stare at each other in silence. They both stand near the window, not saying a word. Soon, Markman tries to break the silence and start a conversation. Then, the two argue about who should choose a quest first. After a sigh, the archer gives in. He then recalls their previous conversation about not finding any information on Lo, the swordsman who defeated them. With that, he mentions that despite his appearance, he's considered a prodigy among archers. Still, he admits that losing so directly to someone unranked was a blow to his pride. Darkus, on the other hand, remains silent for a moment. Rejoining his group, one of the members congratulates him on a job well done, calling him captain. He's then asked about his adventurer registration, and he confirms he signed up. Hearing the news, the group celebrates, since they can now take on a wider variety of quests. One of the members comments that he must have made things difficult for the other candidates. However, the young man just denies her statement. His companions laugh, suggesting the hardest part was holding back, as a high-ranking mercenary would never lose to a rookie. In response, he slams his fist on the table, shattering it. Startled, the group members look at their captain, who has stood up. He then grits his teeth as he remembers that guy. The image of the swordsman flashes in his mind. He recalls how his opponent didn't even look at him during the fight. He realizes he was treated as just an obstacle in the way. Facing his team, he announces that starting tomorrow, their training will be tripled. Everyone reacts with surprise. A member questions the decision, reminding him they could take on new quests, but he replies that it's not enough. He then states that the world is bigger than he thought and that he'll also start training for real again. He admits his pride was wounded, and Markman agrees he can no longer ignore the adventurer rankings. Darkus reveals his rank is 6,725 and his companions is 6,301, while Lo, who defeated them, is ranked 2,728. Confident, Markman claims the 4,000 rank difference will be easy to overcome, and the other agrees they share the same goal. In front of the quest board, the archer suggests Azaben Forest, and the captain agrees that dangerous places are good for climbing the ranks. When they arrive at the forest, they find the swordsman standing before them. Suddenly, a sound from the woods draws the attention of all three. At that moment, Lo says they can talk later. He then runs past them and heads deeper into the forest. As Markman follows, he explains that an injured royal horn has appeared, and the boy asks if he intends to protect the creature. To this, the swordsman confirms while observing the archer's speed. As they run, he teaches him how to use the forest's uneven terrain to move. With that, Markman dashes ahead of everyone. Soon after, the warrior acknowledges that the boy's skill is impressive. He then speeds up even more, racing through the forest. Markman then calls out his name as he sees him approaching. Upon catching up, the boy warns that the beast caught the creature they were chasing. Before them, a giant monster appears, blocking their path. The creature then attacks with its tentacles, forcing the two to dodge. Immediately, the swordsman uses his blade to cut down the approaching tentacles. He stops, realizing he can't get closer, and considers a long-range attack. However, he dismisses the idea when he sees the royal horn would be hit too. Turning to Markman, he asks if he can create an opening, and the boy asks how he would do that. Darkus then shouts to aim for the eyes, while telling the swordsman to keep running. With that, the archer fires his arrows as the other advances through the forest. The arrows strike the monster's eyes, and it roars from the impact. As the creature writhed in pain, Darkus suddenly appears. He runs toward the monster, shouting for the blow to be aimed at the creature's legs. As soon as he hears the command, the swordsman plants his feet to prepare an attack. He then unleashes a horizontal slash towards the monster. The creature roars once more, opening its mouth. Darkus then orders the warrior to grab the royal horn and get out of the way. He immediately snatches the small creature. Right after, Darkus charges forward and strikes a tree. From the tremor, a tree topples directly onto the monster. After the tree crushes the enemy, the swordsman watches the scene, holding the small creature. Markman praises Darkus's commands, who replies he's used to handling subordinates, irritating the boy. From a distance, the swordsman watches the two in silence for a moment. He then remembers the conversation about the top 10 ranks and how his sword skills alone got him there. Looking at the defeated creature, he concludes that swordsmanship alone isn't enough. He watches Markman and Darkus while thinking about how to raise his own adventurer rank. While holding the royal horn, he decides he needs to master more skills beyond swordsmanship. Suddenly, the assistant comes running and apologizes to the swordsman. She then observes the scene with the two young men and the fallen log, asking what's going on. He explains that he thought they were illegal hunters, but it was a misunderstanding that was quickly resolved. Hearing this, the young woman remarks that it was good he didn't attack recklessly and handled the situation peacefully. Even so, she looks at the two involved and considers lowering their ranking for the confusion. Then, she says she's just kidding, but she'll do it next time, and they both agree to be more careful. Afterward, Darkus whispers, asking why the guy hangs around with an evaluator. He replies that it's easier to climb the ranks this way, but it also means constant surveillance. Markman warns that he'll mostly get inflexible jobs and travel a lot, but the girl denies that will happen. Despite her denial, the archer insists, saying he's just being used for her own purposes. He then asks if the swordsman knows why evaluators want an exclusive ranker, explaining it's the only way for them to progress. He continues, stating that evaluators get promoted when they update rankings, using the rankers as a means to climb. As she walks ahead, the young woman remains silent, and the archer concludes she's just using her partner as a stepping stone to advance. He just repeats the word progress under his breath. At that moment, he recalls the evaluator's determination when she said it was something she had to do. With this, he wonders if he's really being used, but concludes that she doesn't seem like that type of person. A moment later, the girl checks the surrounding area, stating that it seems safe. Suddenly, the royal horn rubs against her, making her turn from the movement. The swordsman comments that the two seem to have become friends, but she complains that the creature doesn't understand personal space. Darkus then calls the animal an ungrateful wolf, and she replies that its attitude is due to the guy's scary appearance. As he tries to defend himself, she cuts him off, saying it's his scary aura's fault, and walks away carrying the creature. He repeats her words, while the evaluator comments that something is bothering her. She then approaches the defeated monster and identifies it as a forest fisher. Next, she explains they had never encountered this creature before, as its natural habitat is in cold places. She also realizes the monster has never been seen in the Azavan forest. With that, she asks her partner to register the creature's existence, and he agrees. Finally, she explains to their two companions that she's on a research mission and asks what they are doing there. In response, Darkus states they are doing something similar and received the mission from the evaluation office. Hearing this, the assistant finds the answer strange, wondering if there was any mission for mercenaries and archers in the Azavan forest. Right after, she understands what happened between the three of them. She realizes the swordsman influenced them to accept the ranking mission. While petting the royal horn, she thinks there's something important he needs to understand. A moment later, the young woman approaches with a device and says she has good news. She then explains that the speed ranking has been updated because his sword technique was accepted. The device shows that his overall position has risen from 58th to 26th. She asks if he's happy with the result, and the young man confirms, albeit with some hesitation. With a smile, the evaluator comments that she was able to see the technique thanks to her instincts as a member of the evaluation office. He stares at her for a moment and asks what she means by that. He then questions if she's always this incredible. The young woman smiles at the question. With a confident pose, she returns the jab, asking if he's only just now realizing it. From a distance, the other two approach, asking what rank he achieved. She then asks if the guy wants to show them, and he agrees. As soon as the device is shown, Markman complains upon seeing the swordsman has climbed in all the rankings. Afterward, Darkus turns to him and says there's something important he needs to know. Sincerely, the boy admits he's not good at anything besides his sword. From this, the mercenary understands that he is only trained in swordsmanship so far, and the other confirms. He then remembers how the archer helped him move, and the captain's command instinct. Next, Darkus explains that as a leader of a mercenary group, it's natural to create plans to protect his subordinates. He also details the importance of formations, instructions, and everyone's positioning in an attack. Still, he questions if the swordsman is really interested, since his technique doesn't seem to need any advice. Firmly, the boy states that he does, asking them to teach him more. At his response, the two companions look at each other in silence for a moment. Shortly after, Darkus begins to explain that to travel in a forest, one must use all their senses, and promises to give tips on how to walk. While watching the exchange, the evaluator thinks that he's changing, and that she's happy to have helped him. However, she soon realizes there are many unknown variables in the Azavan forest. She concludes that this mission might be too much for the group. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure was watching the group through a dark portal. Suddenly, two men appear, and one of them comments that he found them while searching for the missing beast. Hearing this, the other older man states that their organs, still fresh, could be sold for a good price. The muscular man then says that even though they're not like the beast, he'll have to capture them anyway. Finally, he warns that anyone who enters a beast's territory should expect to be attacked by one. So, Markman starts explaining that using their 5 senses isn't an easy task. Right after, he adds that it takes training to apply the senses in combat, and the swordsman listens intently. He claims this forest is perfect for their training because of all the strong sense. While Darkus admits he doesn't understand, the archer reveals he can accurately sense the number of nearby animals. Next, he explains he's using a low level of prana to detect them. He then describes prana as a talent and instructs the others to focus their consciousness to enhance their perception. Following the explanation, the swordsman closes his eyes and begins to focus his consciousness, gathering his energy around him. Soon, a large amount of energy manifests around him, observed by his two companions. Both react to the intensity of the released energy. Even so, the young man remains focused on sharpening his 5 senses. Shrouded in his aura, he then walks through the forest. The energy expands rapidly, covering a large area of the woods. After it expands, a lone figure stops at the top of a cliff. With his senses sharpened, the man's image appears in his mind. Suddenly, he lunges forward, sword in hand, as the assessor watches him. As soon as she calls out to him, the young man turns and warns that someone is watching them. Then, he realizes an enemy is approaching, just as an energy-infused punch comes his way. Next, a beam of energy shoots through the area, creating a powerful explosion on impact. At the sound of the explosion, his companions react and shout his name. Soon, the forest path is covered in dust and debris. The swordsman is seen on the ground, amidst the dust kicked up by the attack. Shortly after, a man appears and reveals he tracked them by the prana they were releasing. Immediately, Darkus prepares for combat alongside the archer and asks who the newcomer is. The new adversary's image is reflected in the assessor's eyes. He then turns to the two of them, and she warns them not to fight. The young woman then identifies him as Dalkan Iris, the adventurer ranked 672. They both realize the man's rank is very high and that he is stronger than them. Dalkan notices he's been recognized, and she replies that he's famous for his career. She then adds that he was about to reach a double-digit rank. Then, she describes him as someone who committed a crime and had his rank lowered as a result. At that moment, a new figure approaches from behind Dalkan. A blonde man arrives, out of breath, complaining that Dalkan is too fast, but the other man just says he's slow. The newcomer then notices the assistant, mentioning there's a civilian present, though he doesn't know who she is. The young woman then identifies him as Russo Cruel, and the man reacts to hearing his name. She continues, revealing he's a black market dealer, ranked 76th. Hearing this, Russo praises her for being well-informed and knowing about the crime rankings. A note explains that the crime ranking reflects the severity of a criminal's actions. It also details that this is an unofficial ranking, created by users and sometimes adopted by official bodies. Shortly after, Dalkan looks to the side and mentions the unicorn. Then, he finally spots the creature hiding behind a tree. He stares at the unicorn and states that he's been looking for it. Immediately, the assistant steps in front of the creature to protect it. She then confronts the man, asking why he's traveling with that other guy. He openly replies that his motivation for the partnership is, obviously, money. She then questions him, stating he could earn money fairly with his skills. However, Dalkan corrects her, explaining that money isn't the only thing he wants. He then reveals he has two reasons for the partnership: to sell to and buy products from Russo. The assistant repeats the word buy, processing the information. The man then reveals that ranks can be bought if someone really wants to. This possibility causes a visible reaction in the young woman's eyes. She then accuses him of insulting the rankings in front of a civilian. Suddenly, Darkus appears behind Dalkan with his sword aimed at his neck. Even so, he stops the blade with just 2 fingers, without looking away. Meanwhile, Markman aims his bow and declares that their mission is to patrol the Azavan forest. He adds that they can't allow someone as dangerous as Dalkan to roam freely there. Finally, the man just glances to the side. With that, he releases his energy and decides to handle the situation in his usual way. Using his aura, Dalkan shatters Darkus's sword with just his fingers. Right after, he lunges forward, shrouded in energy, to deliver a final blow to his opponent. Darkus watches the attack approach, unable to react. He realizes he won't be able to escape the impending blow. At that moment, a green energy rushes toward the fight. Lo arrives just in time to intercept Dalkan's punch, and the impact of their auras creates a shockwave. Immediately, the attacker demands to know who the newcomer is that blocked his attack. The young man then replies, saying that was his line. With that, the two energies collide, creating a massive explosion on the spot. Relieved, the assistant yells that Lo is safe, but he replies that the enemy is much more than he seems. Facing the figure ahead, the girl wonders if that imposing man is the hunter they were looking for. Recalling an image of the target, she confirms her suspicions without a doubt. Without hesitation, the young man rushes forward and prepares a swift attack with his sword. He then unleashes a powerful blast of energy at Dalkan. The blow hits its mark, kicking up a cloud of dust. However, the opponent blocks the attack and questions how a boy like him can use prana. Lo realizes his opponent is strong and that the attack had no effect. In a flashback, his master warns him to be careful when facing someone who wields prana. The lesson continues, explaining that his disciple is a special case, as one must become a master of something to obtain prana. He reveals that prana is a hidden power awakened by those who delve deep into a single purpose. With this, the master concludes that the enemy's awareness of prana already says a lot about him. The memory shows the man reaching the mountain summit alone. The mentor then concludes, stating that the opponent is definitely a master of something. Back in the present, the swordsman grips his weapon and prepares to fight again. The assistant shouts for him to be careful, revealing that Dalkan is ranked 12th among boxers. The information about the enemy's 12th place ranking echoes in the boy's mind amidst the tension. Next, the girl continues reading the data, reporting his rankings in other categories. Soon after, she discovers the opponent is ranked 7th in weightlifting. With this, the assistant concludes Dalkan's power is world-class and warns them not to get close. The fighter then complains about how annoying it is to have a certifier nearby revealing his information. Focusing on the girl, he decides he'll crush her first. He then channels his energy into a tree, as the assistant watches from a distance. In an instant, Dalkan rips the entire tree from the ground with his bare hands. As he prepares to throw it, he orders the girl to die. The tree then flies at high speed toward the assistant. At the last second, Lo appears in front of her and slices the trunk in half. Without wasting time, he fires a new beam of energy at the enemy. The young woman shouts her companion's name as she runs toward him. Amidst the wreckage, he remains standing, his energy enveloping him. Suddenly, Russo Cruel appears and reacts to the scene with surprise. He then comments that the boy possesses a strange prana. Russo Cruel tells Dalkan to capture that person, assuring him he'll get a good price for them. With that, the brute confirms he will capture him as planned, if he survives the fight. From a nearby tree, Markman warns it would be a problem if they were forgotten. Immediately after, he fires 3 arrows at Dalkin. However, the man effortlessly blocks the arrows with his energy. Wrapped in his aura, he turns toward the archer. He then questions if they are truly worthy of being remembered. Meanwhile, Darkus appears from behind and throws an object toward the opponents. The young man yells, "Push it now!" while the enemy shouts back, "Don't mess with me!" Then, Dalkin yells he'll get rid of them all and unleashes an explosion of power. The energy surges forward, completely destroying the ground around the group. When the dust settles, he looks up and wonders where everyone went. Facing the empty path, he laments that they managed to escape. Rosso Cruel approaches and tells Dalkin that was dangerous. He then asks what he would have done if the target had died in the attack. Far away, the group flees through the forest, with Darkies carrying the assistant and Lo carrying a wolf. As they run, Markman praises his companion for understanding his intention to retreat. He then confirms they all agreed the only option was to escape that place. Without a word, the swordsman keeps running alongside them while carrying the animal. He then reflects that this was the true strength of a rank 600 opponent. Suddenly, he grips the wolf's fur tightly, causing the animal to react in pain. After being released, the creature backs away, growling, as Lo apologizes for his action. When they stop, Darkus asks if they've gone far enough to be safe. As soon as the assistant calls his name, the young man replies that there's still one more thing he needs to do. The girl then asks him to make sure he captures that person, remembering Rosso Cruel. In a low voice, Lo repeats the target's name, Rosso Cruel. He then asks if she's referring to the bearded man, and the assistant confirms with a nod. The young man then wants to know why they need to capture him. Her answer is firm. The girl states it's for a personal goal of hers. However, Darkus interrupts them, suggesting they decide on their next steps first. She agrees with his comment. The assistant apologizes, admitting she got ahead of herself by bringing it up. Their ally then explains that their mission is to patrol the forest, so they will continue to monitor the 2 targets. As an agent, she declares they don't stand a chance in a fight, and Darkus agrees, stating they will only observe. The girl further details their plan to expose the crimes to the agency, while Markman wonders what they would gain from it. At this, she just sighs and says he's unbelievable. Next, she mentions they all have high stealth scores, and that the forest is a dangerous place. She concludes that if they succeed, they could climb 1,000 spots in the rankings, which motivates the archer. The agent then warns them not to do anything reckless, and Darkus confirms there will be no combat. She then turns and asks Lo what he plans to do. He reveals that his group wants to take the royal horn to a safe place. Darkus agrees it would be difficult to fight with the animal nearby, and the girl adds that the risk of ambush is higher. However, the swordsman reveals that's not the reason he made his decision. He then clarifies that he simply doesn't want to involve the royal horn in the situation anymore. At this, the assistant comments that the animal must have been very scared because of them. Given the situation, Darkus suggests that for now, the groups should split up. Lo proposes they meet again under the large tree after they've taken the creature to a safe location. When asked why, he explains that way they'll have backup if they need each other. Before they leave, Markman offers to show him how to move through the forest, and the young man thanks him. Darkus warns that if they take too long, Dalkin might escape, but the archer assures him he can find him later. With that, Markman gets ready to teach Lo, while the other man just watches. The young man then asks to learn more about their strategy, and Darkus agrees to teach him just a little more. So the pair demonstrates their movement and combat techniques for the newcomer. After the lesson, he admits it's a lot of information to take in at once. Next, he asks to borrow Darkus's dagger since his sword was broken, and the other man agrees to lend him the hunting blade. Finally, their ally advises him to do some image training to increase his chances of success. The assistant then decides they will take the royal horn to a safe place. Lo agrees that although Dalkin is a concern, they have a responsibility to complete their mission. So she asks if he truly understands what she means, and he confirms firmly. Still suspicious, she presses him, asking if he's sure, and the young man reaffirms his decision. Lo explains that he believes in the pair, considering them more capable, and the assistant agrees that they are trustworthy. At this, she raises a finger and says she has a proposal. The suggestion is that they look for the royal horn's home while they conduct their ecological survey. She then explains there might be others like it there, and if it's safe, they could leave it in its habitat. Lo asks how they would find the place, and the assistant replies that they just have to ask it. With that, she turns to the animal and asks it directly where it wants to go. The wolf then darts ahead, and the girl concludes that's the right way. He questions if they should really follow it, and the assistant states they need to trust its instincts. The young woman reflects that, as a scared cub, it's natural for it to want to go home. Hearing her reasoning, The young man agrees that it makes sense. Suddenly, she shouts upon spotting another unidentified creature in a tree. Luke orders her companion to record the creature, and he confirms he understood. A moment later, the young man shows a simple drawing of the animal and asks if it's good enough. Next, Luke points to another creature and tells him to take it down, scolding him for replying to every order. As night falls, she continues to point out new creatures for him to record as they set up camp. With Luke and the royal horn asleep, Lo moves away from the campfire and heads into the forest. Alone, he focuses and takes a deep breath to begin his training. Then, the young man manifests his energy around his body. As soon as he finishes, the girl approaches and reveals her name is Luke. She asks if she interrupted him, but he replies that he was just reviewing what Eddie taught him. With that, she explains that she was awake and checking the report he wrote. She comments that his drawing isn't good, but for now, she'll give it a passing grade. Lo then calls her by name and reminds her about the goal to capture Rosso. He asks if this goal is the same thing she said she had to do no matter what. Holding the notebook, Luke quietly confirms that it is. At her answer, he states that he'll help her, leaving her surprised by the offer. The young man comments that when he stays up late, he feels like everything he's holding back is about to explode. Right after, he says he understands that feeling very well. Surprised, she questions how he could understand, since he acts like it's no big deal. Her reaction leaves him momentarily silent. Then, Luke asks if that's why he's been training late every night, and he confirms it. After a moment of silence, the girl stares at him near the campfire. She thanks him, but points out that he doesn't even know what her real goal is. Interrupting herself, Luke decides she'll tell him. With that, she declares she will reveal her true motivation. She begins to explain that the rankings are a list of the best, where everyone competes for honor and worth. Then, she asks what would happen if the opposite existed, a ranking that recorded people from the bottom up. With a serious look, she defines this system as the worst ranking. Finally, Luke reveals that this is the dark side of the rankings that she is chasing. The story then goes back 5 years, to a time when Luke had a close friend. The girl, who walked with a cane, was named Miriella. Born blind and unfamiliar with the world, she never laughed at her friend's dream. Sitting on a bench, Miriella praised Luke, calling her amazing for wanting to become a certifier. Luke then explained that her dream was to achieve the #1 rank and leave her mark on history. She lamented that the other kids didn't believe in her, and that Miriella was her only support. Her friend smiled, suggesting that maybe their school was just too small for someone like Luke. Then, Miriella mentioned her dad said their family was invited on a cruise. When she struggled to remember the name, Luke shouted that it was the Bondrushan's cruise. She explained it was a luxury ship, while Miriella admitted she didn't know much, since the invitation came from a relative. Miriella then offered her ticket to Luke, who immediately asked why. With her eyes closed, her friend explained it was because she can't see. In an instant, Luke jumped to her feet and shouted, refusing the offer. She insisted that if she went, she wanted to go with Miriella. Firmly, she took her friend's hand. With that, she promised to hold it the entire time. Miriella thanked her with a smile and said she'd ask her dad. At her response, Luke broke into a huge smile. So, after Miriella's mother gave up her ticket, Luke was able to board the Bondrushans. For someone who didn't fit in at school because of her big dreams, Miriella was her only friend. However, 2 days later, tragedy struck. Due to engine trouble, the ship ran aground amidst the chaos. The vessel immediately began to sink. In the cabin, the crew reported that half the lifeboats weren't working, and it would take 3 trips to evacuate everyone. At that, an officer ordered all passengers to be gathered on deck. The captain then took responsibility, declaring he would decide which passengers would board the lifeboats. The officer promptly agreed to the order. Looking at the papers, he concluded he had no choice but to use that. Meanwhile, a crowd of passengers waited for instructions on the ship's deck. An officer then announced he would call the names of the passengers for the first boat, telling them to board immediately. Luke calmed Miriella, reassuring her that she was right there with her as the officer called out names. Suddenly, her friend's father shouted her full name, Luke Imeldi. The officer continued reading the list, calling the names Lucas Nixon and Oliver Crow. Once the list ended, Luke realized those were all the passengers for the first boat. Confused, she turned and asked why only her name had been called. Miriella remained silent as she let go of her friend's hand. When asked, she said she was fine and insisted that Luke should go first. Luke argued there was no time for that, and they would only survive if they cooperated. Miriella then said she believed Luke would become a certifier and asked her to believe in her too. With her eyes full of tears, the girl clenched her fists. The boat that reached the shore immediately returned to the ship to get more people. However, Miriella wasn't on the lifeboat that returned to the beach. The third rescue attempt began in the darkness, but it was already too late. The ship was completely engulfed in flames. Unable to believe it, Luke fell to her knees in the sand. murmuring that it couldn't be. One of the officers remarked it was a good thing they'd gotten a spot on the boats, and the other agreed it was because they had lived diligently. That happened because those in the worst ranking are always left behind. Not understanding, the girl approached and asked what they meant. She then questioned what the worst ranking was, surprising one of the officers that she had overheard them. Clenching her fist, she realized from their reaction that it was a secret. Luke demanded an explanation, threatening to spread the term worst ranking to everyone if they didn't talk. With no choice, the officer agreed to tell her everything, but asked her not to say anything to the captain. She stared at him with a firm gaze, waiting for the revelation. Back in the present, sitting by the campfire, Luke begins to explain what the worst ranking is. She reveals it's a ranking that lists humans with the lowest abilities so they can be identified. She then asks if he can imagine what that ranking is used for. Lo correctly deduces that it's used to decide who gets discarded in a crisis. The answer leaves him silent for a moment. She continues, explaining that the owners of this ranking use it to prioritize lives in their professions. Finally, Luke declares that her goal is to eliminate the worst ranking that killed Miriella and drives people to despair. After hearing the whole story, Lo remains silent for a moment. He then says he understands about the worst ranking, but asks what it has to do with Rosso. To this, Luke replies that, in other words, you have to use a criminal to catch a criminal. She explains that since Rosso's ranking is also unofficial, capturing him could lead her to the mastermind behind it all. Luke concludes that to do that, she first needs to find a way to deal with Dalkin. Lo asks if she has any idea who the mastermind is. She says no, but suspects it's a large-scale organization. She then speculates that maybe there's something like an underworld certification agency, though it's just a hunch. A silence hangs between them as the campfire burns in the darkness. Breaking the silence, he comments that it must have been very hard for her. He continues, saying she carried that entire burden alone for so long. Finally, he says that even though it was painful, she never gave up, and that's why he respects her. His words leave her completely stunned. Her voice cracking, she asks him to stop. She admits that if he keeps saying things like that, she's going to start crying. The two remain silent before the fire, facing each other. Lo watches the flames in silence for a moment. Then, Luke asks him to tell his story too. She insists it's not fair for her to be the only one crying and asks him to reveal his goal as well. He agrees to tell her but says he won't cry. She retorts that she'll make him cry in her arms. The next morning, Luke starts crying uncontrollably. Lo asks if she's still crying, but Luke replies that the tears won't stop, now that she knows how hard it was for him. With that, she says she now understands his hurry to get to the Isle of Gods and check if everyone is safe. Lo then replies that she was the one who taught him that you don't get anywhere by being impatient. As she composes herself, Luke asks him to let her know if she's lacking in any way. He asks what she means by that. With his hand outstretched, the young man invites her to be his exclusive certifier, this time officially. Wiping away her tears, she agrees to the proposal and adjusts her hat. Then, Luke holds out her hand and promises she'll never make him regret his decision. Hearing her promise, he stares at her in silence. The two then shake hands, sealing the deal between them. After they resume their walk, Luke comments that they've walked quite a bit. As they watch the animal, Lo expresses his hope that it can find its way back home. At this, Lo asks what kind of region royal horns live in, and Luke replies that it's mainly caves. She explains that because they have a strong life force, they live peacefully in these places and rarely need to hunt. Suddenly, the royal horn barks and darts down the trail at high speed. As they run, Luke shouts that the place must be nearby and tells Lo not to lose sight of the animal. He replies that he sees it. The animal then continues to run ahead of them at high speed. The path leads them to a giant rock, and she wonders what it is. Looking it over, she wonders if it's just a big rock. Then, she dismisses the idea and wonders if it could be something else. Soon, she identifies the creature as a muse mimic and can't believe such a rare magical beast exists. Lo then observes that the creature is already dead, and Luke replies that this solves everything, leaving him confused. With that, she asks if he knows what a mimic is, explaining that it's a beast that lures humans with treasure. She continues, revealing that the muse mimic uses magical beasts instead of treasure to attract hunters. Luke defines it as a walking museum, which must have traveled to many places collecting magical beasts. The young man then asks if the royal horn was also inside, and she confirms that it was. She then explains that the mimic attacks by releasing all its beasts at once, but this time it seems to have been counterattacked. Immediately, Lo concludes that the one responsible for the attack was Dalkin. With this, Luke concludes that the investigation is complete, as the mimic's death caused the outbreak that destabilized the ecosystem. Faced with this revelation, The young man just comments on how horrible the situation is. Right after, he asks if the wounds were made by the hunter, but his companion concludes they were caused by another magical beast after the mimic's death. She explains that since the mimic forms a strong bond with its beasts, the culprit was probably already in that forest. Meanwhile, the royal horn approaches the mimic's carcass and lowers its head. As he gets closer, Lo comments that the animal has lost its home too. He then says he knows that feeling, comparing it to having a broken heart. Hearing this, the young woman calls out his name, visibly worried about him. Suddenly, a giant red creature emerges from behind the carcass. Immediately, she shouts that it's the creature they saw before. In an instant, the monster leaps and attacks in their direction. Lo manages to pull her aside and dodge the impact. The creature then begins to devour the mimic's carcass. Soon, it tears off and eats large chunks of the rock. Seeing this, Luke shouts that the monster was the one that ate the mimic. The royal horn charges forward and bites the creature's leg. At this, she screams as she sees the monster throw the animal against the carcass. The monster then strikes the royal horn and throws it far away. Even injured, the animal gets up again, ready to continue the fight. Seeing this, Lo steps forward and orders his four-legged companion to stay put. He then declares that he will take the creature down and advances towards it. In a memory, Markman questions him about a technique he keeps failing to use. The master then watches him attentively, analyzing the situation. He admits he doesn't know much about swordsmanship, but asks if the technique uses prana, and Lo confirms he's failing to control his. Hearing the answer, Markman smiles and says that if that's the case, the solution is simple. With that, he offers to teach him his family's method of prana control, assuring him that the apprentice will master it quickly. Back in the present, Lo concentrates and channels his energy as his eyes glow intensely. Lo asked about the prana control method. Luke explained the next step. Using his senses to look inward, he needed to observe his own interior. It was like visualizing everything from above his own head. The boy encouraged him to try, promising he'd see something interesting. For someone overflowing with prana like Lo, this method would be highly effective. Senses sharpened, Lo focused on seeing inside himself. Massive energy manifested all around. He recognized that energetic form as himself, but the flow of prana was a complete mess. Now he understood what needed to be done. Meanwhile, a monster burst into the forest, making his friend scream his name. The creature advanced with a giant hand to attack. Sword firm in his grip, the young swordsman prepared the middle path. With a smooth transformation, he unleashed a swift strike. The young observer wondered if the second technique had actually worked. The green-haired boy warned that a single blow wouldn't be enough. Without hesitation, the swordsman unleashed multiple cuts against the opponent. Only the transformation could generate so many simultaneous attacks. The sequence of cuts seemed endless. Finally, one last blow landed on the creature. When the dust cleared, it revealed a horned wolf, a royal horn. The swordsman approached slowly, asking the animal not to be afraid. He knelt down, assuring it he was no enemy. The royal horn licked his hand in a sign of trust. He decided to accompany the wolf. The forest had become dangerous, and he was worried about Owl. Meanwhile, a man found Keem down and yelled his name. Elsewhere, Dalkin told a captured creature to stay still, complaining he couldn't cut it properly. He asked his partner if he could break it a little, but the suited man warned the price would drop. The braided mercenary asked why, since they were going to turn it all to dust anyway. He was told buyers would suspect it was a fake product. Hidden, Owl commented that just looking at those two made him sick. His partner agreed. Eddie admitted they weren't opponents they could defeat. His partner confirmed they just needed to report back. Adam warned that almost all the merchandise was collected. His partner announced it was time. Suddenly, Dalkin turned and declared he would deal with the hidden spies. The hidden duo reacted immediately to being discovered. Dalkin leaped toward them, unleashing a ferocious attack. The youths hit the ground from the impact. Owl asked how they were discovered, but the enemy claimed he knew from the start. He explained that while hunting magical beasts, they sensed everyone in the area. Eddie was surprised. A 3-digit adventurer wasn't just strong. Immediately, Owl threw a small smoke bomb. Dalkin caught it mid-air, but an arrow struck the pouch in his hand. As Dalkin promised to kill them, the caped boy yelled for his partner to run. The archer confirmed they were already doing it. Realizing that bluffing wouldn't work, the young man asked what they would do. His partner pulled out a leaf. They needed to increase their survival rate, even just a little. Wasting no time, the archer wrapped the leaf around an arrowhead. The arrow was fired, leaving a trail behind it. After stopping, the young man commented he had done everything possible. They stood in silence for a moment, just looking at each other. The braided man appeared before them, asking why they hadn't fled. He revealed he knew the entire terrain and promised to eliminate them at once. Owl asked him not to get in the way, but Eddie retorted that that was his line. He explained that archers show their true skill with cover, warning it was a mistake to think this would be like the exam. His partner agreed. Things were different now, and team battles were his specialty. Eddie declared he wouldn't follow sloppy orders, and the caped boy just said, "Okay." Finally, both prepared for combat. Lo looked at the forest, commenting he smelled something strange. He wondered if it was just his imagination. Luke called him, asking what they would do with the royal horn. The creature conveyed that it was best to protect the child and take it to the recognition bureau, stating they could leave the task to her. The boy warned that the man wouldn't stay quiet. To leave the woods with the animal, they would have to defeat Dalkin. His partner nodded in agreement. The young man declared he could think of exactly 2 methods. The first method was to wait for Owl to report and bring reinforcements, but that would take time. On the other hand, Dalkin handled prana better than him. He wasn't confident he could escape Dalkin's perception for long. Luke interrupted him, saying the second method was very simple. Energy manifested in the distance. Dalkin turned, questioning what was happening. He soon realized the 2 youths were also capable of using prana. The 3 faced off, prepared for combat. Owl explained that they couldn't before, but had become capable of manipulating prana. People awaken this energy by mastering a specific field, but without a trigger, they cannot awaken. Owl honed his team battle sense through mercenary work and reading enemy strength. Eddie was a prodigy archer, born of a prestigious lineage, so no one dared challenge him. Unfortunately, neither knew defeat. But recently, they met an irregular prana user named Lo. That experience was enough for both to awaken. Owl advanced against Dalkin. His attack was blocked midway. Dalkin counterattacked with a punch, but the opponent also hit him squarely. The 2 fists clashed with force. Owl noticed something in his hand, wondering if that sensation was the power of prana. Positioned, Eddie commented he could use it before, but this was the first time he saw it this way. The archer stated he could now fire arrows with more precision and loosed one of his projectiles. Dalkin noted the arrow was going exactly where he intended to dodge. In a quick movement, he leaped aside at the last second to avoid the attack. The arrow, however, hit a bomb that had been thrown into the air. The bomb exploded, generating a large smoke screen. Right after, the man looked at his belly and realized an arrow had hit him. He turned toward the branch where the archer was positioned. Eddie understood his opponent could aim wherever he went. The adversary realized the archer climbed the trees simultaneously with the distraction. The duo demonstrated their coordination, with the swordsman pressuring the target revealed by the archer's shots. Owl wondered if that was the opponent's true strength. Owl made a hand signal, and Dalkin realized the adversary was skilled at bluffing. Dalkin raised his hands and said he would give up. He claimed he was just dealing with them casually to save energy. Then, he commented that this wasn't a difference that could be solved using one's head and prepared to fight for real. Owl and Eddie charged at the same time, asking not to be underestimated. However, Dalkin intercepted the blade with his bare hand. Immediately after, he repelled the attack using brute force. The speed of his grab was clearly superior. The caped boy was surprised by the opponent's maneuver. The braided man held the youth's wrist firmly. With crushing grip strength, he smashed the blade without hesitation. In a single kick, he sent the adversary flying. The young man was hurled to the ground by the impact. From high in the tree, the archer yelled his companion's name. Next, he was also hit and knocked from the branch. Fallen, the caped boy tried to call for his friend. The braided man approached, commenting that he was barely hanging on to life. He raised his fist to end it all, but an attack surprised him. The final blow was blocked at the last instant. The newcomer thanked them for the message left on the arrow. It allowed him to arrive in time. Still motionless on the ground, Owl asked them to warn Eddie. Dalkin recognized the green-haired youth, who informed him about the last, simple method. In a firm tone, he declared that this method consisted of Lo himself defeating him. A confrontation screen announced the fight between Lo and Dalkin Iris. Eddie commented that Dalkin was late. An older man questioned if he was having difficulty against mere boys. He considered that the only unpredictable variable would be Lo, just as he had thought. The man then smiled. Meanwhile, Dalkin, Iris, and Lo faced off in the forest. Lo wielded his sword while Dalkin prepared for combat. In an instant, Dalkin advanced toward his adversary. A punch was thrown with force. Lo blocked the attack using the sword's blade. The youth leaped and counterattacked with a slashing blow. Dalkin defended using both arms. Immediately after, Lo attacked from above. The 2 strikes clashed powerfully. Dalkin commented that the boy's movements had improved a little. He wiped the corner of his mouth and added, "It was only a little." He stated that Lo was no match for him. Then he jumped and landed a kick. Lo was thrown backward but recovered his balance. Dalkin charged again against the young swordsman. The attack was deflected with a quick dodge. The braided man hit the tree behind him and asked what was wrong. In a jump, He reached the top of another tree and said Lo couldn't win just by running away. Shortly after, the boy slid along the ground to escape the tree thrown at him. Dalkin leaped toward the target, ordering him to die. The young man remembered something important. He recalled that Dalkin's adventurer ranking was 672, and that this man had already faced stronger opponents. He understood that one should never underestimate an adventurer's ranking. With this in mind, Lo knelt and prepared for combat. His power was released, leaving Dalkin surprised. Lo advanced and hit the opponent with a sword strike. The mercenary accused the boy of copying his technique, but the swordsman replied that it couldn't even be called a technique. Dalkin yelled for the boy to stop talking nonsense. Lo advanced, stating there was no need to fight head-on against a stronger opponent. In a memory, Owl explained that tactics weren't about creativity, but memorized knowledge patterns. He continued, saying the basis of tactics is ensuring numerical advantage, and that he would teach some simple patterns for that. Owl asked if he understood, as tactics boiled down to creating the situations he would explain. The first tactic consisted of ambush attacks through teamwork. The second was attracting the enemy to your territory, and the third began with the two separating. An attack coordinated with a hidden unit was revealed, with Owl appearing from above. Dalkin was surprised to see that Owl could still move, calling him a bastard. Lo commented that he was really making the other work hard. Dalkin grabbed Owl by the neck. Lo yelled to act now and charged toward the enemy. Owl appeared from behind and held Dalkin, who called him a bastard. Dalkin released a wave of energy that threw everyone backward. With the impact, Owl and Lo were hurled far away. The mercenary commented it was a pity for Lo and prepared a new attack, but an arrow hit Dalkin directly in the eye. The man retreated from the arrow shot that momentarily downed him. The shot came from Eddie's direction, wounded and distant in the forest. Sitting and bloody, the boy asked them to flee. Lo immediately prepared to attack. He advanced with a sword strike against Dalkin. Lo hit Dalkin in the chest with the sword. Dalkin stomped hard on the ground, forcing the opponent to retreat. The mercenary glared at him, demanding to know what that was. Then, he asked who Lo took him for and released his energy. Owl was thrown to the ground by the impact. Lo advanced again and unleashed another attack. The clash of blows created a blast of energy that rose to the sky. The young man was flung high by the force of the collision. Dalkin commented that the boy managed to block, but this was the end. He prepared for a final attack, promising to crush him the moment he landed. Between yells, he stated Lo deserved praise for lasting so long. However, he added that this time there were no companions to rely on. He screamed for him to just die in silence. Lo adjusted his body in the air, preparing for the impact of the fall. Upon landing, he knelt and declared he wasn't his enemy. A girl screamed Dalkin's name. The man turned toward the voice, interrupting the attack. Suddenly, a white creature hit him from the side. The animal bit the mercenary's arm with force. Dalkin cursed the creature, calling it a bastard. The girl screamed Lo's name. Immediately after, she ordered him to finish it. Lo leaped, preparing an attack from the skies. He dove at high speed toward the target. Several energy strikes fell upon Dalkin. He was hit repeatedly by the sequence of attacks. He realized the blows wouldn't stop coming, and noted they were getting heavier. Lo concentrated his entire body and prepared his final movement. A last powerful attack hit Dalkin squarely. The impact launched him backward while Lo landed on the ground. The young man approached and found Dalkin fallen in the center of a crater. The girl ran to them, calling for Lo. She asked if he was okay, but soon detected his injuries were terrible. Still, she congratulated him for being incredible and for defeating Dalkin. Lo replied he only knocked him down and that he wouldn't move for a while. Suddenly, Dalkin's hand appeared and grabbed the boy's face. The mercenary rose and threatened, saying he would kill him for sure. Lo was astonished to see that bastard still standing. The girl screamed for him to let Lo go. Dalkin turned toward her. The girl and her creature took a step back. She called him a monster as he approached slowly. The mercenary complained that even with such strength, he couldn't crush that brat's head. The white creature attacked him, forcing him to release Lo. The swordsman composed himself and wielded his weapon. In a memory, Dalkin asked how long they would rest. Another replied there was no need for haste, since Dalkin had plenty of stamina, and as had already been said, to rise in ranking, they needed to be cooperative and consider everyone's pace. Dalkin then stated both were pathetic. He advanced and grabbed Lo's neck. He declared he would strangle him to death right there. Lo struggled, repeating to himself that he couldn't die in a place like that. A memory emerged, a girl smiling and extending her hand. The boy held Dalkin's arm and yelled that he couldn't die. More memories of another girl crossed his mind. Dalkin was surprised by the boy's reaction. A large sphere of energy formed before him. Dalkin was pushed back by the energy emanating from Lo. Lo remembered the gentle wind and the scattered clouds. The memory continued about drawing water, touching the earth, and seeing eternity in the sacred light. A voice ordered the intruder to look forward with his own eyes, and to observe these precious days that would never fall. Dalkin seemed confused by the situation. His arm began to unravel from the energy. Dalkin screamed as the limb disappeared completely. He called Lo a bastard and demanded to know what the boy had done. The secret art of the Thule tribe manifested, to reach the heavens. The sitting girl wondered if that was really Lo's secret art. She tried to understand what she was witnessing. She realized it was different from other techniques. Dalkin faced the scene with gritted teeth. He called the youth a damn brat and advanced to attack. A punch was thrown, but it stopped on Lo's body. The blow had no effect whatsoever. The swordsman prepared an attack with his weapon. The blade hit Dalkin squarely, and Lo declared he lost. Defeated, the man reflected that rankings were garbage. In a memory, an evaluator explained that to rise in the adventurer rankings, he now needed team results. He continued saying that Dalkin reached rank 5862 4 years ago, and since then did all missions alone, lacking teamwork. Dalkin slammed the table, yelling that was ridiculous. He demanded to be judged by his results, claiming to be stronger than most two-digit rankers. The evaluator replied they couldn't change the evaluation standards and couldn't promote him at the moment. Dalkin questioned about the boy who just got second place, arguing he also worked alone. The man explained that for certain rankers, criteria could have exceptions, but he didn't qualify. Then he stated that if it were up to him, he would kill Dalkin right there. The mercenary remembered how rankings were everything to rankers, and that they lived to rise in position. A man introduced himself as Ryu, rank 461, and the woman beside him as male, rank 5072. Ryu expressed the honor of joining a 3-digit ranker, while Dalkin thought he had no choice but to ally with those weaklings. He believed he lacked teamwork because he was too good, and his partners only slowed him down. During a mission, the team encountered a giant griffin. Ryu apologized, telling Dalkin he didn't know of the creature's existence there. The braided ranker defeated the beast with a single punch. With the monster felled, he hurried the other two to finish the mission. At night, the group rested around a campfire. Dalkin realized he had encountered more giant magic beasts since joining the duo, but defeating them wasn't difficult. He woke up and saw his companions moving away, trying to understand what they were doing. He followed the group and observed them from a distance. He found the two collecting valuable materials, while Ryu commented that now he could spoil himself again. Ryu explained the plan was to obtain information on the beasts, so the idiot would handle the heavy work. Male asked if he really thought Dalkin hadn't noticed. The lad stated there was no way he noticed, and they should continue using him as much as possible. Suddenly, Dalkin appeared behind them and called them trash. He asked if he should throw the bag away or kill them, and ordered them to choose. Ryu called for Male, but something hit her suddenly. The punch struck his companion's face with brutality. Ryu knelt beside her, trying to check the injuries. Then he turned to Dalkin and asked what he had done. The ranker simply called him an idiot. Ryu yelled they might be a burden, but Dalkin shouldn't have hit a companion. Then he bellowed that was why he couldn't rise in the adventurer rankings. Ryu threatened him, saying he would report the incident to the agency and his word would be considered more reliable. However, he stated they were generous, and if Dalkin apologized, they would forget everything. He asked Male if that was right, and she agreed. Dalkin questioned if they really expected him to lower himself to people like them just to rise in ranking. A smile appeared on his face. The scene changed to his ex-companions' bodies on the ground, while he murmured it couldn't be. But he rose and declared he had no regrets. The agency, however, discovered exactly what happened. Thanks to past accumulated achievements, he escaped prison, but had his ranking revoked and was banned for 3 years. During that period, the opportunity arose to sell himself for money. And while living recklessly, the deadline for re-registration finally arrived. Dalkin started living surrounded by riches. It was then that a trafficker made him an unusual proposal. The man questioned if he didn't want to buy a ranking. Dalkin reflected that perhaps he just wanted revenge. He wanted to destroy the rankings, and he desired to see the recognizer who didn't value him regret it. In the present, he asserted that damn brat would one day feel the same. He remembered the pain of hitting the limit as a ranker, with nowhere left to go. Victory was announced for Lo, adventurer rank 2728. With the battle over, Lo and the girl observed Dalkin fallen on the ground. Lo bent over in pain. The girl noticed he was moving away and asked where he was going. The swordsman replied it wasn't over yet. The young woman then commented she needed to capture Rosso. She recalled that if she captured Rosso, she could get closer to the brain behind the worst ranking. The girl held him from behind, warning not now. She stated that in Lo's current state, They should wait for the next chance. Lo tried to argue, but the girl comforted him, saying it was all right. She embraced him, declaring that just finding a ranker like him was enough for now. Lo turned and apologized, surprising her. Immediately after, he passed out on the floor, causing the young woman to scream his name. After the fight, Eddie was the first to wake up and went to the agency, while Owl assisted with treatment. Even wounded, Owl said he could move if he used his prana, and it was worth using it. While Lo slept, his companions took care of everything. In a dream, his mother revealed she had a long dream. The woman asked her husband if telling their 1-year-old son the technique would do any good. The man reassured her, explaining that techniques are engraved in the heart, in the prana. He added that when Lo awakened his power, he would remember everything. Little Lo was embraced by his mother. The father recounted that their ancestors possessed special powers, but because of that, they were defeated, and one of them founded Tuli Village. He explained they lived hidden, but everything ended well, and thanks to that, they could pass the days far from conflict. Young Lo appeared in the dream and told his father he thought so too. The man questioned him about why. Then they taught him the technique. Lo remembered his parents, his grandmother, and all the others. He realized everyone knew that one day he would have to fight. Lo opened his eyes, emerging from the dream. A man and the girl observed him. The subject commented he was waking up. The young woman called for Lo, who was now sitting up. With relief, she said she was worried because he hadn't woken up after a day. Lo thanked her for treating him. He asked why Mr. Loud was there, and the man explained he hurried over while he slept. Mr. Loud commented he heard about the problems on the first mission and helped Lo stand. Eddie asked Owl if he went to the recognition agency on purpose and came back. The mercenary replied he was worried. The man turned to Dalkin, who remained tied up, asking if he could also move. He began untying the ropes, telling him not to resist, as it was a waste of time. The man then led him outside along with other escorts. Observing Dalkin's arm, he mentally questioned what happened to it. He noticed the limb wasn't cut, but simply disappeared, something he had never seen before. He concluded that perhaps something existed capable of hitting a first-tier knight. The group, now reunited, followed a trail in the forest. The girl commented to Lo that after recovering, he should register in more varied rankings. She explained that rankings lead to self-analysis, citing Dalkin's example, who knew his strength was incomparable in close combat. Lo asked if the idea was to register in various rankings to understand his strong points, and the young woman confirmed enthusiastically. She added she would guide him in the capital, as the recognition agency possessed facilities to measure diverse abilities. The older man from before reflected on the prana fluctuation he felt and confirmed his suspicions about the boy. He questioned if that appearance was natural or a deliberate attempt to attract attention. His objective was to make contact with the Island of Gods. Meanwhile, Eddie approached a large stone door adorned with serpents. A hooded figure received him as leader, stating they were waiting for him. Eddie announced to his comrades they had finally found a descendant of Babel. Seated on a throne, the leader declared they could now advance with the plan to save the world controlled by rankings. Then, he ordered his comrades to reveal their total power. The group presented itself under the name Ouroboros. A man named Rosso Cruel was revealed as 76th in the smuggler ranking, and Grosco Cruel figured as 76th in the trafficker ranking. Another man, Adam, was presented with multiple criminal rankings. He was the leader of Ouroboros, the first-tier criminal organization. The group arrived at a large city. The girl announced excitedly that they had finally arrived. She instructed Owl and Eddie to proceed to the treatment room, while asking Mr. E. Loud to handle Dalkin's transfer. Lo commented she was giving orders to everyone, but the young woman replied she was used to it. She warned the three lads to keep their schedules free 10 days from now. With a signal of 3, she declared she would update their rankings. Owl and Eddie were anxious for the good results they expected to receive. The girl approached Lo, saying she needed to discuss something regarding the royal horn. She explained the recognition agency needed a guardian for the magical beast and would like Lo to assume the function. He questioned if he could handle the responsibility. She mentioned that when royal horns grow, the agency facilities become too cramped. She added that as an adventurer, Lo could take the creature for free walks, which was better for it. Lo finally agreed to take on the task, and the young woman thanked him. Lastly, she asked him to name the creature. Lo reflected for a moment. He decided to call him Ralph. The girl praised the name and asked if there was a story behind it. Lo began telling about a man who faced a red grizzly bear alone. He related that the story showed a brave warrior before the giant creature. He explained that man was courageous, and so he borrowed his name. Lo thanked Ralph for saving him in the fight against Dalkin, and asked him to take care of him from now on. The creature stared at him silently. Ralph remained under the protection of the recognition agency, and Lo discovered he could visit him occasionally. Upon heading to the treatment room, he he found Owl and Eddie speculating about their new ranking positions. Lo began imagining how high his own ranking would rise. He felt a slight enthusiasm and wondered if that was the sensation of a ranker. The young man asked his friends to be quiet in the hospital room. A doctor named Clara Save appeared and guaranteed she could cure any injury in 10 days, provided they followed her orders. She pointed at Lo and ordered him to lie down too, complaining that ranker adventurers were idiots. Already settled in their beds, Owl declared to Lo that he wouldn't lose to him and that the two would catch up soon. The doctor yelled for them to stay quiet and released her power toward them. The bandages began to move as if alive, wrapping Lo's body. The three youths, now bandaged, wondered if that was also the power of prana, while Clara observed their instant recovery. During the healing period, the girl visited them several times, but always seemed very busy. She appeared overloaded with much work. A recognizer's work is described as the most rigorous and fair in the world. A woman approached the girl's desk, commenting she was working hard. The woman asked if the evaluation was taking long. The young woman confirmed there were many difficult judgments to be made. Then, the visitor asked her to contact a prana scholar named Layla, and the girl agreed to look into it. While researching, she couldn't find any information about a tribe called Tuli. The recognizer wondered what exactly that technique was. 10 days later, the three lads gathered with her in the evaluation room. The young woman explained that to update complex rankings, one must rent the room and analyze a massive amount of data. Owl asked how many people worked on all that, and she replied she did it all alone. The lads were surprised, but she clarified she had a little help from friends. Owl reflected that preparation for adventurer ranking was much more complex than for mercenaries. He concluded that Recognizer was extremely competent. Lo commented he caused them problems. The girl replied that was her job, and some Recognizers finished in half a day. She then prepared to get straight to the point. The Recognizer announced she would update the three's adventurer ranking. The evaluation began with Owl Darkus, current ranking 6301, for having cornered the offender Dalkin Iris. His excellent insight, strategic thinking, and independent leadership were highlighted. Considering everything, his new adventurer ranking was announced as 2097. Next, Eddie Marksman's evaluation began. Current ranking 6752. His mental strength to hit the target, understanding of prana, and good sense in forest environments were praised. Based on this, his new adventurer ranking was revealed as 1873. Finally, Lo's analysis began, ranking 2728, mentioning his ecological discoveries and the cause of the beast outbreak, his swordsmanship skills, high potential to absorb new techniques, and his mysterious technique were considered. After gathering all factors, she announced the new ranking. The result placed him at ranking 1089. The girl commented he came close to a 3-digit ranking in a single jump, and Lo agreed the speed was exceptional. She warned Lo to be prepared. She explained that the moment rankers receive attention is when they update their rankings. And although his friend's advancement was incredible, Lo's jump was revolutionary due to the increasing difficulty of the rankings. In other words, people all over the world were now seeing the results. In various places, everyone learned Lo's name. From now on, he would experience various changes as a ranker, for better or worse. Elsewhere, a woman announced the end of the knight ranking update, praising the youth's growth. A female knight borrowed the rank tell to check a ranking that interested her. She remembered an adventurer reached the 3-digit barrier in a single jump that morning. The knight then observed his ranking rose, even after having stolen the Kensiru Ryu. A wave of energy spread around. The knight apologized for the act. She explained she unconsciously put too much force into her movement. Lo and Luke arrived in front of an imposing castle. The lad observed the structure before them. Luke commented she didn't know the Recognition Bureau possessed a place like that. The young woman presented the enormous facility the Bureau prided itself on, the Challenge Hall. Inside the location, several people tested their skills on diverse equipment. Luke reminded him of the conversation about registering in various rankings. She explained the Challenge Hall was a valuable facility where one could measure skills and receive classification immediately, but she completed that despite easy access. Only the simplest rankings could be updated there. Lo deduced there were classifications easy to update, and others not. Luke clarified she had already updated Lo's sword speed ranking, but adventurer ranking required presence at the Bureau. Lo then supposed easy to update rankings must have high competition, but could be a good start. He touched his chin in silence, while Luke watched him attentively. The girl continued staring at the lad. Lo averted his gaze to the horizon. Luke leaped, declaring she would analyze his skills all day long. The Recognizer encouraged him, stating high classifications would help in adventurer ranking, and he should give his best. Lo asked if he could use prana, and Luke confirmed that was part of his ability. He understood and concentrated. In the running ranking, the youth advanced at high speed down the track. He crossed the finish line and the scoreboard revealed his position of 871st. Next, in the vertical jump test, he scaled a building and reached the 1057th position. Lo participated in grip strength, weightlifting, and reflexes rankings. He also tested balance on a beam and lung capacity. For the hearing ranking, he enhanced his senses with prana. The lad achieved 104th position in the hearing test and 98th in smell. Luke informed they finished almost everything related to physical skills, leaving endurance for later. In the background, a group of adventurers commented, Lo was incredible for having risen to 4 digits at once. The recognizer stated many eyes were watching him because of his high classifications, and he needed to get used to it. Among the spectators, a group stared from afar. A silver-haired knight watched him attentively. Luke commented that, although training with Eddie helped, Lo also possessed natural aptitude for using prana and enhancing his senses. She then compared him to a wild animal. Lo repeated the word wild to himself. Luke continued the analysis. Although his muscle strength had growth potential, it would be better to strengthen agile movements. Arms crossed, she stated she was in a dilemma. He replied her judgment seemed wise. A man approached, and Luke greeted him as Manager Gran, who returned the greeting. Lo asked who the man was, and the young woman ordered him to bow before a high-ranking person. The manager reassured them, saying courtesy wasn't necessary in adventurer rankings. Lo recalled hearing that phrase before. He recognized the man as the manager of the Traquista branch of the Recognition Bureau. Luke explained that to maintain justice, recognizers possessed no hierarchy, but Mr. Gran was a rare exception. She added he was famous in the city, responsible for countless rankers and for updating Mr. Loud's classification. Lo remembered Mr. Loud himself, saying the same thing about courtesy. Mr. Gran then addressed Lo, stating he wasn't such a good recognizer, especially for him. Gran revealed Dalkin Iris was a ranker under his responsibility. He explained he came to apologize and thank him. The manager called Lo a rising star who instantly reached the wall of digits. The man bowed deeply, thanking Lo for having stopped Mr. Dalkin. Gran informed the investigation into Dalkin's fall was concluded and revealed his companions tried to take advantage of him. The duo engaged in luxurious activities incompatible with their ranking, and the Recognition Bureau was already watching them. However, when they learned of the plan, Mr. Dalkin had already acted, and Gran hoped he had trusted them. The manager stated recognizers examine rankers with pride, and false reports are never approved. Lo replied he understood what he was saying, but added the responsibility wasn't Mr. Gran's, leaving the manager surprised. He continued stating rankers also think, and recognizers are support, not needing to teach everything. Lo concluded that rankers have their own pride, and Dalkin certainly followed his. In a prison, Mr. Gran approached a cell, commenting it had been a while. Chained, Dalkin Iris recognized him as the recognizer from before. The manager confirmed he wouldn't deny it. He then asked why Dalkin hadn't fled. Gran declared that with the strength he possessed, Dalkin could have broken the ropes easily. The prisoner just told him to shut up. In thought, Gran reflected that rankers seeking hierarchy show respect to opponents they recognize as superiors. It was a boy who made him remember a ranker's pride. He recalled the name Lo. Outside the building, the manager expressed his gratitude once more. Mr. Gran announced he was leaving and asked what the two planned to do. Luke replied they were going to update a few more rankings. He then questioned which classifications they intended to challenge, and the young woman commented she was thinking of those related to the sword. The manager also demonstrated curiosity about rankers of prana quantity. Gran warned measuring prana there might be difficult. He explained the country was advanced in technology, but lacked knowledge about prana, and local equipment wouldn't be able to measure it. Luke asked what he meant by that. While walking away, Gran advised her to be prepared if she wanted to continue as Lo's exclusive recognizer. Lo questioned what he meant, but the girl didn't know how to answer. He then commented on the existence of devices that measure prana, and Luke confirmed she intended to test some. But, given what the manager said, she suggested they challenge sword-related rankings first. Lo asked if they were like sword speed ones, and Luke confirmed, explaining there were various types. The girl raised a finger and said she had a very important request. She whispered for Lo not to use the Kensaru Ryu, and he wanted to know why. Luke explained Kensaru Ryu is a single-blow transmission swordsmanship, a special technique only the first knight in the ranking can inherit. For ranking knights, Kensaru Ryu is a dream and a goal. She stated it was no exaggeration to say a large part of rankers strive to inherit this technique. Lo then realized how incredible the swordsmanship he mastered was. The girl mentioned the cuts he launched casually were actually an advanced technique. She clarified that only 800 people in 2 billion could perform such a feat. Luke revealed the founder of Kensaru Ryu was the first knight in the ranking, Lawrence Wolf-Riven. He was a first-class swordsman and a scholar who developed many techniques, Kenseru Ryu being his masterpiece. The swordsmanship that freely manipulates cuts possesses immeasurable value. Therefore, Luke advised Lo to hide this ability so as not to cause trouble with high-ranking knights. Lo agreed to be careful. She called him to challenge the rankings, and the lad questioned if it was good to register even without being able to show full potential. He commented maybe it would be better not to register than obtain a low classification, but Luke said confidence isn't gained without registration. She added she didn't think he needed to worry. They arrived at the consecutive cuts ranking, where one must strike a special cut-resistant rock to measure the number of wounds. A swordsman attacked the rock with multiple blows. The scoreboard displayed the number 1862, and Lo evaluated the result as not bad. Then the wounds on the rock healed themselves. He pointed at the rock, noting that using a smooth transformation would yield good results. Lo then attacked the stone with a sequence of fast blows. The scoreboard registered 749, a result obtained using only prana. The next challenge was the cut precision ranking, where one must pass the sword through a slit between two plates. A participant executed a precise cut between the plates. The scoreboard showed 734. Another man congratulated him, saying a true swordsman should be in the 3 digits. Lo positioned himself and performed his cut. To the surprise of the two present, the scoreboard marked 87. He commented to Luke it was time to practice the third technique, now that he mastered smooth transformation. The young woman observed that even without using Kenseru Ryu, Lo surpassed most rankers. Luke smiled, concluding to herself her evaluation was correct. She asked if Lo had his ranker card, the same one he used to enter Azaban Forest. The lad handed over the card, and Luke explained it was possible to register up to 10 classifications there. The recognizer stated she would register the highest scoring ones for him. Lo questioned what high classifications would be, while a silver-haired knight observed them from a distance. The woman approached and asked if the classification was really so high. The knight positioned herself before the challenge rock. With a single kick, she destroyed a large part of the stone. The scoreboard revealed her classification, 29th place. Lo recognized how high that position was. The knight turned and asked why he was surprised. She stated that if he exerted himself, he could also do that. Following that, she revealed she knew Lo was a Kenseru Ryu user. The lad realized his secret was discovered. Luke called for Lo. The knight proposed a fight to him, and declared that if she won, Lo would have to give up the sword. Setsu approaches him and issues a challenge for a fight. She imposes a condition. If she wins, he must give up his sword. Lo simply asks about the sword itself. The knight tells them to go elsewhere and asks them to follow. Setsu turns and starts walking, while Lo and Luke watch her. They arrive at a grassy courtyard, and she states that this location will serve nicely. Lo explains that revealing the Kenseru Ryu is humiliating, and he doesn't want others to see the technique. The knight introduces herself as Setsu Aurelia, ranked 305th, and asks that they maintain bare minimum courtesy. Setsu asks if he understands her feelings as a ranked knight. Luke questions how she knew Lo uses Kenseru Ryu. Setsu replies that he used the technique shamelessly during the adventurer registration exam. She recounts that a more experienced ranked knight witnessed the scene. After his explanation, she knew Lo had stolen the technique. Lo denies stealing it. Setsu challenges him to explain, asking if Master Adal taught him personally. The knight calls that ridiculous, saying Adal is a noble who would never connect with someone like him. Setsu declares that she will inherit the Kenseru Ryu from Master Adal, as the master himself clearly stated it. Lo then supposes she probably just saw the technique in written records and reproduced it. The knight accuses him of spreading a false name and offers forgiveness if he apologizes. However, the young man insists that Adal really taught him. Setsu stares at him and asks what he just said. He clarifies that he became Adal's disciple for just 1 year. Setsu clenches her fist and grinds her teeth. She declares that he has defiled her soul and insulted her admiration, stating that Lo deserves to be struck down. A confrontation board announces the fight between Setsu Aurelia, 305th ranked knight, and Lo, 1089th ranked adventurer. Setsu advances at high speed towards him. The knight attacks, but Lo blocks the blow with his sword. He prepares to counterattack with the glittering blade, saying he'll be hit if he doesn't fight back. Setsu asks if his attack is a gale. She holds her sword firm and decides to use the same technique. The two prepare their glittering blades and gales against each other. The techniques collide with great force. Luke watches the clash and notices that Setsu's gale is a little different from Lo's. The knight's technique reveals itself to be faster than his. Multiple blows from both sides collide in the center of the field. The impact of the explosion pushes both both combatants apart. Lo prepares to attack again. Setsu observes him and says that since he used the soft transformation, she will show the real version of the technique. The two advance against each other using the soft transformation of the middle path. The sword techniques collide once more. Both struggle to advance with their respective attacks. Luke watches the scene, calling it an incredible battle between Kenseiru Ryu users. But soon he gets confused. If Kenseiru Ryu is a unique transmission and Lo learned it from Adol, it makes no sense for Setsu to use it too. Lo prepares to attack again. He realizes her soft transformation is different from the one he knows. More rustic, yet driven by pure skill with the sword. He is then struck by the knight's blow. The force of the attack throws him backward while Setsu remains firm. Setsu observes in silence. Lo stands up and wields his sword again. The knight reaffirms her trust in Master Adol. She declares victory in the glittering blade and the middle path, challenging him to compete in the wild path. Lo appears to be wounded. She questions if he can only use 2 techniques of the Kenseiru Ryu. Setsu provokes him, reminding him that he proclaimed himself Master Adol's disciple. Luke checks Setsu Aurelia's information on his device, discovering she is 17, the same age as Lo. The young woman continues analyzing her rankings. She realizes that Setsu's classifications are far superior to Lo's. The data makes it clear. The current Lo cannot win with the sword. The young man then prepares to act. He decides to use another power. He recites about the gentle wind and scattered clouds while gathering energy. Setsu is surprised and questions if a rookie like him can use techniques through poetry. His ranking ascension speed is extraordinary. The knight prepares for the attack, declaring she will crush him and that any ability is useless against her speed. Setsu advances to recover the knight's pride. Lo recites about the gentle wind and scattered clouds. He continues the poem, speaking of those who draw water, tend the land, and feed on life to see eternity. Setsu recognizes that as a technique. She understands that it is a special power only chosen ones can use. Lo then tells the invader to look straight ahead with their own eyes and see the precious days that will never fall. Setsu advances, declaring she will crush him along with the attack. She prepares her glittering blade and unleashes a powerful gale. The attack hits the ground and raises a curtain of dust. She observes the impact site. Lo remains standing, unharmed, using the technique of the Tuli tribe. Setsu looks back and questions how he emerged unscathed. She asks if it's a defensive ability, noting that his prana feels like armor. The knight comments that she feels something strange. Her instinct stops her from advancing. Lo then charges in her direction with sword in hand. Setsu prepares to dodge, stating that his movements haven't changed. She decides to end the fight before he does something even stranger. She prepares to use the wild path. The knight attacks, but Lo also prepares for the blow. She questions why he isn't blocking and concludes there's no way to resist. Lo jumps over her at the instant of the attack. Setsu looks up, surprised. His sword stops its blade a few inches from her head. He then declares his victory. Luke raises his arm and yells that it's enough. Setsu falls to her knees on the ground, but Lo also collapses, and Luke runs to him. The young woman asks if everything is okay, and he replies that his body won't move. Luke observes that the technique seems to have a great burden on Lo, lasting only 5 seconds. Setsu remains silent, watching the scene. The knight murmurs Master Adol's name to herself. Suddenly, Setsu falls to the ground and starts crying. She questions why Master Adol would teach the Kenseiru Ryu to someone like Lo. Luke approaches and asks if he can call her Setsu. The young woman says she understands the knight's admiration for Kenseiru Ryu, but attacking someone suddenly is reckless. Setsu questions her about what special reason there could be. She stands up and declares that she is the only disciple Master Adol has ever acknowledged. In a flashback, she recalls the time when her classification as a knight was stagnant. Back then, Master Adol taught her secretly about the sword. He advised her to relax her grip on her weapon a little. As the master walked away, Setsu had a certainty. She realized he wanted to pass the Kenseiru Ryu to her. In the present, the knight continues kneeling on the grass. Luke questions Setsu's story, explaining that Master Adol is famous for never accepting disciples. Setsu says she thought she was the only exception, someone whose talent the master recognized. She remembers training arduously, believing Adol was waiting for her. The knight continues to lament while holding an object in her hands. She opens the locket she was holding. Inside it, there is a portrait of Master Adol. Setsu goes back to crying and screaming the master's name. Luke then realizes she is just an annoying fan. Lo stands up and states that he didn't lie, and Luke calls to him. She asks if he's already okay okay to stand, and Lo replies that his body is still heavy. He reaffirms that he became Adol's disciple and learned Kenseiryu Ryu directly from him. Setsu, still on the ground, clenches her fists and says she knows. Lo comments that there was no way not to recognize Master Adol's sword and that her Kenseiryu Ryu was real. The knight admits her technique was learned only by observing from afar, unlike his. Lo murmurs that he noticed something was different. He considers her technique, reproduced only by observation, to be even more impressive. Setsu stands up and declares that it was she who proposed the sword bet, and that she will cease to be a knight if he so orders. Luke intervenes, saying there's no need to go that far. Lo states that she has the right to demand anything from him. Setsu opens her arms and asks him to do whatever he wishes. The young man observes her and asks if it can really be anything. Setsu gets apprehensive about what he's going to ask. Lo, Setsu, Aurelia, and Luke rest in silence in an open field. Suddenly, Setsu stands up and says she has decided, but Lo asks her to wait a moment. The knight warns him that strange requests are not allowed, such as touching her body. Lo simply asks why he would touch her. Setsu reacts with a shocked expression. He then reveals his first request, that Setsu help him increase his adventurer ranking, and the second, that she teach him the Kenseiryu Ryu fighting style. Setsu replies that he knows the style better than she does, but Lo admits his skills are still insufficient. She comments that his Kenseiryu Ryu was learned only by imitation, and the quality of the reproduction is impressive. The knight explains that, because they are Master Adol's techniques, she cannot dishonor him by exhibiting an incomplete style. Lo asserts that even losers have pride, and asks Luke for the rank tell to look for night missions. He asks if he can accept these missions, and Luke explains that yes, as long as he accompanies the main contractor. Luke continues, saying that accepting missions from other classes is the fastest method to rank up, as it requires multiple skills. She exemplifies their current situation in the Knight Commission, and concludes that the valuable experience becomes bonus points to overcome rivals. Lo asks if he should accept one, and Setsu encourages him, saying it's a chance to grow as an adventurer. Luke explains that Knight rankings value trust, requiring not just strength, but also dignity, like Adol. Lo comments to Setsu that the Adol described by her seems different from the one he knows. He affirms that Adol has a difficult personality and does things halfway, making Setsu question if he wishes to die. Luke intervenes, saying Adol possesses exemplary conduct and a good reputation among knights. He adds that as proof he is ranked 5th in reliable superiors, something not achieved merely with sword skill. The girl remembers an interview where Adol declared that protecting people is a knight's duty. Setsu comments that the article is from a newspaper 4 years ago, and Luke is surprised she remembers the date. Lo simply asks who said that. He realizes he doesn't know what Adol has been doing since they separated upon leaving the village. Meanwhile, a village is attacked and destroyed by giant creatures. A little girl cries for her parents amidst the chaos. One of the creatures advances toward the child. The girl closes her eyes as the beast's claws approach. A knight appears and cuts the creature, saving the girl at the last second. He turns to the girl and says, "Everything is fine now." Nearby, other knights fight and yell to resist until the commander arrives, but the ground begins to shake violently, surprising everyone. A gigantic magic beast, the tyrant worm, emerges from the earth. 2 knights look at the creature, disbelieving what they see. A gentleman despairs and says this is the end for everyone. The creature opens its massive maw to devour the survivors. A knight orders a retreat, but another says there is no need. At that instant, the commander lifts his weapon and prepares to attack. Adol deals a single vertical blow against the beast. The attack cuts the tyrant worm in 2. One of the survivors approaches and asks if he is the first-ranked knight. The man introduces himself as Adol, commander of the Knights of Marseille, and promises there will be no more deaths. The rescued civilians celebrate Master Adol's arrival. The crowd cheers in unison for Master Adol. The commander simply smiles while receiving the shouts of celebration. The scene then changes to the interior of a grand building. The commander is lying upside down on a sofa, complaining about how annoying everything is. A woman enters thanking him for the work, and he replies it was a good service, especially the pretending to be cute part. She points to the accumulated paperwork, saying this happens because the commander disappears frequently. Adol sits up and reminds her that when he became commander, he agreed to maintain the system and be a good leader externally. He also stressed back then that he would disappear occasionally. The assistant states she won't ask where he goes anymore, and questions him about the wound on his chest. The commander asks if she saw it, and the woman explains rumors already spread among the knights. She comments that to cause a wound of that level, the person must be very skilled, and Adol agrees. Afterward, he lies down again and mentions the boy will become skilled soon. The commander turns his face away, thinking Lo seems to be doing well. He recalls mentally that one cannot reach that level with sword techniques alone, and concludes that in the end, the boy awakened that power. In a memory, Lo and Adol face off in intense combat. The youth releases his power against the commander. Adol is surprised by the sensation running through his body. He realizes his prana disappears the moment it touches the boy. The commander understands he will need to increase his strength to defend himself. Back to the present, Adol reflects that Lo's ranking is too low for the power he awakened. Finally, he wishes for the boy to become stronger and face no difficulties on his journey. Meanwhile, Setsu announces she has already made a decision. She shows a new commission to Lo and Luke. The mission is to escort a VIP on the Continental Railway for the client Thomas Belkin. The summary details the trip, mentioning rumors of assassins and the need for experienced individuals. In a shadowy place, a large room with a table is revealed. Two hooded figures enter the mysterious location. One of them confirms they are leaving and asks to keep it a secret from the leader. The same voice explains they need to know in detail what stage the technique awakening is at. Depending on the situation, they might tell the boss about the true nature of the Lord's Island. A robotic being concludes they might become allies, since both have the same target. The imposing Dream Zephyr waits at the station. This locomotive travels the transcontinental railway linking the Kingdom of Valter to the Republic of Aereo. The 6,000-kilometer journey carries up to 616 passengers across 31 cars. Lo is awestruck by the machine's sheer size, wondering how something so massive can even move. Luke informs them they need to find their client, Thomas Belkin, on the platform. He should be easy to spot. Setsu warns Lo to be careful and polite. Trust is crucial in escort missions. The knight instructs him to show his rancor card immediately upon finding the client to prove his identity. Thomas Belkin appears with his guards, demanding to know what a country bumpkin is doing there. When Lo tries to hand over his card, the man knocks it to the ground, claiming he doesn't need to see it. Belkin shouts that he can't trust his life to an idiot on such an important escort mission. Setsu steps in and asks if he investigated her background, but Belkin says he just wasn't expecting a brat like Lo. The girl then introduces herself as Setsu Aurelia, one of the Sword Saint candidates. The revelation leaves the client completely shocked. The man's expression changes radically as he realizes who is standing before him. The title Sword Saint candidate is given to knights with the potential to become the future #1 ranked fighter. Her high compatibility with the fighting style made Setsu the youngest candidate ever. She continues by presenting Lo as someone even more skilled, which calms the client down. Thomas Belkin finally picks up the card. Upon seeing the ranking, he confirms he can trust him. The client asks who the other girl is, and Luke introduces herself as Lo's exclusive appraiser. Belkin feels more secure with an appraiser present, admitting he was tense due to recent incidents. Belkin's guards say their goodbyes, stating they will resume their duties in the Republic, and asking the group to care for him until then. Once they leave, the client grumbles that words are cheap and it's troublesome not being able to trust one's own family. Setsu suggests moving to his cabin to hear the details, and Belkin guides them toward the gold car. On the way, the knight asks if it's Lo's first time aboard the Dream Zephyr. She offers to explain the train's facilities to ensure a smooth escort, and the lad agrees. She begins by describing the 8 bronze cars, the 2 public restaurant cars, and the pet car. The group then crosses through the 2 department store cars. Next, they pass the library car and the 6 silver cars, used by wealthier individuals. The explanation continues past the large public bathhouse, the hospital, the vegetable garden, and the pool. Finally, Setsu points out the luxury restaurant before they arrive at the gold car, used only by the very rich. Thomas Belkin welcomes them to his room and indicates that theirs is the cabin right next door. Setsu then asks the man to tell them about the enemy. The client seems to ponder for a moment before responding. Belkin reveals it's just a rival merchant guild. The knight asks if it's the Lol Guild. The merchant asks how she knew, and she explains she did minimal investigation on the target. Belkin confirms vaguely, stating they only need to deal with the assassins sent by the rival guild. Setsu notices the evasive answer and asks how long he has been threatened. The client claims it's recent and that the rival's goal is to ruin his business deal in the Republic. Lo supposes it would be better not to ask what kind of deal it is, and Belkin agrees with the suggestion. The knight asks Lo to keep watch outside while she analyzes the room layout. But before the lad leaves, Setsu calls his name. She praises him for the speed at which his ranking is rising, but warns that this creates a lack of experience. She also reminds him not to lower his guard, as this is his first time fighting an assassin. The young man listens to the words with a serious expression. He and Luke leave the room to begin their watch in the hallway. Lo admits he's confused because there's so much he doesn't know. Luke reassures him, saying it's normal for someone who just arrived in the capital. The lad then asks how the door moves. The appraiser explains it uses electricity and a special prana. Luke then reveals that the Republic of Heir is an advanced nation in prana research, and that the Dream Zephyr was built with this technology. The appraiser reminds him of the similar door at the appraisal bureau. She explains that the Republic supplies technology to them as well. Lo observes that the world is vast. He continues the thought, mentioning Yuna's name. Looking out the window with his companions, he laments that it would have been nice to come with her. The lad remains silent for a moment. Then Luke turns and says she has something to tell him. The girl suggests that upon reaching the Republic, they might discover something about the Isle of Gods. Surprising Lo. A man passes them in the corridor. Luke explains she investigated the lad's ranking update procedure but found nothing. She continues, saying it's rare for the appraisal bureau to lack information, but there is another similar case surrounding Lo. That case is the Isle of Gods itself, a land the bureau also knows nothing about. Luke states that two unknowns have overlapped, both centered on Lo. The appraiser concludes that the reason he made contact with the island might be because of that special procedure. Finally, she reminds him that Gran's equipment couldn't measure Lo's prana, but she believes the Republic of Heir will be able to. The lad repeats the Republic's name to himself. Luke perks up, saying she's even more anxious now, and that his prana values will likely change. Suddenly, Lo's eye darts rapidly. Setsu asks if he noticed something, and the young man confirms with a brief nod. The knight advises him to act naturally, and states he doesn't need to warn her about the timing of the attack. They continue walking down the train corridor. Lo questions what she meant by timing. An announcement informs them the train will depart shortly. Another welcomes passengers to the Dream Zephyr. With the locomotive's movement, Lo loses his balance and stumbles. A dagger flies past the exact spot where his head was a second before. A man turns with the weapon in his hand. Luke realizes Lo only fell because he didn't know the train would lurch. If he hadn't fallen, Lo would have been killed. The assassin approaches, stating the lad got lucky, but he guarantees he won't miss next time. The assassin asserts the lad can do nothing from that posture and promises a comfortable death. But Lo is already preparing to draw his sword. Suddenly he throws an object toward the opponent. The man deflects it easily with his dagger, claiming that won't buy him time. Suddenly, the aggressor's vision is blocked. He realizes it was a scabbard the instant Lo charges. The swordsman lands a direct punch on the adversary's chest and catches his sword in midair. Immediately, he assumes a combat stance with the blade in hand. The two face off again, balancing in the train corridor. The assassin rushes the swordsman. Lo blocks the enemy's strike. The aggressor uses the lad's body as support to leap over him. He quickly moves in for a new attack. The swordsman deflects the opponent's daggers. With the hilt of his sword, he strikes him in the chest. Lo realizes the enemy kept aiming for his solar plexus. With the assassin defeated on the floor, the young man turns to Luke. The girl runs toward him, asking if he's okay, but the lad states it's not over yet. He dashes off, saying he senses two more presences. He points toward the room and yells Setsu's name. The knight is in the room with 3 other defeated men and comments that Lo is late. The lad remains silent, surprised by the scene. He enters the room with Luke and comments that the enemies attacked as soon as the train departed. Setsu suggests they stop moving for now, as the adversary's actions are more radical than expected. But Thomas Belkin insists the deal must happen regardless. The knight agrees and says they will secretly get rid of the attackers so as not to interrupt the train's operation. She drags one of the men toward the window, while Lo questions if the enemy entered that way. With a firm movement, Setsu throws the aggressor out of the moving train. The attackers' bodies fall beside the tracks. The knight explains this is the best way, as they cannot interrogate them, and it's better to keep them far away. Lo asks if they won't die, but she guarantees that with their skill level, they will survive. The swordsman turns to Thomas Belkin and informs him they will hold a strategy meeting right there, asking to be notified if he moves. She then asks Luke for her assessment of the assassin. The appraiser estimates that by crime ranking, he would be around rank 500, with flexible combat experience for a rank 300 knight. She adds that in direct combat, they aren't that strong, and Lo would have won instantly if he hadn't fallen. Setsu concludes that if they are at this level, they can handle the enemies alone, and Luke agrees. Finally, the knight turns to Lo and asks how it was for him. Lo admits it wasn't easy busy dealing with the opponent. Setsu says this is normal, as all rankers feel the wall of digits for the first time. Luke explains that the term refers to the enormous skill gap that exists at the border of digits in all rankings. Even with a difference of just one number, the abyss of power is immense, as many rankers struggle to change their digits. The appraiser adds that with Lo's current ranking, the 3-digit wall is right in front of him, in a realm of much stronger rankers. Setsu complements this by saying that for this reason, missions become harder, and this one might be a bit too much for him. The lad asks what he should do. The knight then reminds him, asking if he forgot what he told her. She recalls that it was Lo who asked her to teach him the sword saint style. The train continues its high-speed journey through the landscape. Atop one of the cars, Setsu and Lo prepare for training. The swordsman comments on the strong wind, and the knight confirms they will use it to train. Setsu explains that when they crossed swords, she felt his prana handling didn't go beyond the basics. She supposes he prioritized acquiring skills, forcing what would be impossible with only his total amount of prana. The sword saint style is complex and requires him to learn high-level prana techniques, not just the basics. But Lo argues that learning techniques by force would make him stronger. The knight then says she needs to correct a misunderstanding, explaining she wasn't calm in their last duel. She moves away and faces him from a distance atop the train roof. A leaf is carried by the wind into the sky. Setsu appears behind Lo in a rapid movement. The knight explains that this is the movement of the sword saint style. The true value of the style is wielding the sword at invisible speed, and the lad is still too slow for that. But she reassures him, saying that if he follows her instructions, he will learn the third technique. The third technique is the explosive blade, the King of Destruction, one of the most special in the style. Lo confirms he knows what it is. The techniques he can reproduce end at the explosive blade, as the fourth and fifth are too difficult to imitate. Setsu admits it's frustrating not being able to complete the style, and that she will leave the rest to him. The lad notices the frustration on the knight's face. Then, she prepares to begin training. For the first lesson, Setsu reveals they will use a rope. In a memory, a doll explains to Lo that the explosive blade is a special technique for taking down multiple enemies. He then prepares himself and tells the boy to watch. With a single movement, Adol delivers a blow that devastates the surrounding area. The youth just watches the result of the attack. He concludes that this isn't swordsmanship upon seeing the enormous destruction on the cave wall. Back in the present, Setsu says that for the first lesson they will use the rope she bought. Lo asks if she's going to tie him up, but the knight denies it and tells him not to get the wrong idea. She then prepares to give a demonstration. The swordsman lashes the rope forward with a precise, quick movement. She states the lesson will be complete if Lo can do the same and hands him the rope. The lad tries to throw the rope, but it buckles in the air. The tip snaps back and hits him in the face. Lo complains that the wind pressure is pushing it back, and Setsu confirms that is the intention. The knight explains that prana grows with flow and can be channeled to increase instantaneous power. She concludes that this is the skill he needs to master, a power boost through maximum instantaneous output. Lo then prepares to swing the rope again. He injects prana into his arm and lashes the rope successfully, but Setsu points out the timing was a mess, explaining he needs to calculate the prana flow. The lad concentrates again, admitting it is difficult. He then decides to use even more prana to achieve it. The knight interrupts him and says that's exactly what he cannot do. She warns that using brute force will become a bad habit and won't teach him the correct technique. She further explains that the technique he wants to master already consumes an immense amount of prana. She continues, saying that with this exercise, he will learn to use his energy more efficiently. Lo simply interrupts her, saying he won't run out of energy. He claims he can use dozens of times that amount of prana and still not be exhausted. Setsu then challenges him to release all his power, and the lad agrees. Lo unleashes an overwhelming amount of energy. The knight watches the scene, completely shocked. Meanwhile, inside the train, Thomas Belkin asks Luke what that was. The appraiser is surprised to feel the quantity of prana, realizing it's even greater than before. She wonders if Lo has gotten even stronger. The immense energy spreads through the department store car, drawing the attention of other passengers. A man turns in fright and wonders what kind of monster that is. In the library, another passenger notices the absurd amount of prana and questions if there is a single-digit ranker nearby. But the man analyzes it better and concludes that despite there being much power, it isn't refined and has openings to exploit. The subject then reads a book, noting that half a day remains until the next phase of the operation. Outside, Lo continues to release his overwhelming energy. Setsu admits to herself that this is more than she expected. The quantity of prana makes her question if the lad is still human, but she sees this as a stroke of luck to deter enemies. She concludes that in terms of volume, Lo might already be one of the greatest in the world. The knight then remembers Lord Adal and asserts that his apprentice is a true monster. Back in the cabin, Luke awaits them with her device in hand. She receives the duo back and asks about the training, and Setsu replies that Lo is close to finishing the first lesson. The lad asks how many lessons remain, and Setsu answers there are 3 in total, and that tomorrow's will be tough. She then questions if Thomas is still in his room, and Luke confirms. Surprised, she knows. Setsu explains she can sense his prana, as everyone possesses it, but few can use it. Lo is surprised to learn she can do that, and the knight replies that for a practitioner of her style, this is the minimum. She states she now understands how much prana the lad wastes daily, and that the training will correct this. The appraiser takes advantage of Thomas's absence to hand a document to Lo, suggesting they talk business. The swordsman asks what it is, and Luke explains it's a complete analysis of their protection target. The appraiser praises the knight's wisdom, and Setsu confirms this is something everyone in the Order of Marsis Knights learns. Lo begins reading the dossier on Thomas Belkin, second-generation president of the Belkin Trading Company. The company started as a small pharmaceutical firm but grew rapidly under Thomas's father's management. Thomas himself expanded the department store business, becoming the country's largest. Lo comments that he seems to be an incredible man, and Luke adds, he is also a good person. Setsu observes the businessman is very cautious, but has an explosive temper, and the initial distrust was a manifestation of that. She concludes that, although quiet now, at some point he will want to leave the room. Luke then prepares to share her own information with the group. Lo reveals that she researched the assassins and found information in the Appraisal Bureau database. The appraiser remembers when they fought Dalkan and explains that in danger zones like the Azavan Forest, there is no communication. For ranking updates, a special encrypted line is used for security reasons. Returning to the subject, Luke comments that the 3 assassins seemed coordinated, and Setsu agrees the timing was too perfect. Normally, they would be hired individually to leave no traces, but the precision indicates they were recruited as a team. It's difficult to identify an individual assassin, but an entire team is another story. Based on their area of operations, skill level, and weaponry, it is possible to identify them. Without a doubt, they belong to the Despada group, the 49th ranked criminal organization. Despada is a subsidiary of Desdora, the 6th organization, and its high command is composed of elite assassins. Lo and Setsu worry because if the high command is on the train, it will be more than they can handle. Meanwhile, the man in the library gets up and walks down the hall. He sits in a window seat and retrieves something from under the table. A note with a cipher reveals preparations are complete. The individual gets irritated, realizing his subordinates were intimidated by Lo's prana, and decides he'll have to dirty his own hands. Then the assassin, Joman Tepel, ranking 108, states he will do the job himself. The group finishes their meal in the dining car. Thomas Belkin leans back, satisfied with the delicious food. He comments that the food is the highlight of any trip and well worth the price. Lo complains that poison testing the meal was a drag. He then invites Luke to eat, but the appraiser explains she needs to share his experiences to evaluate him properly. Belkin stands up. He announces he'll go shopping to aid digestion and orders them to protect him. They walk through the department store car, the client admiring luxury goods. He analyzes a piece of porcelain, commenting on its quality and limited variety. Lo and Setsu watch from afar. The young man wishes the client would restrain himself. The female knight explains it's better to let him do what he wants to avoid stress. This ensures his cooperation in an emergency. Shortly after, she announces she'll patrol the area and asks Lo to stay with Mr. Thomas. Luke asks about the training. The swordsman replies it's rigorous, but his stamina has improved now that he uses prana efficiently. The appraiser asks if he has ever run out of prana. Lo thinks for a moment and answers no. Luke finds this strange. He explains that prana exhaustion should occur repeatedly during training. The young man asks if it isn't simply because he possesses a large amount of prana, but the appraiser finds that even stranger. She explains that his poetic art drains a massive amount of energy in a single instant. Luke comments that he thought his art was erasing whatever he touched, but in that case, his clothes and the floor should disappear too. Lo reflects that since it consumes so much prana, there must be a corresponding effect. Then the appraiser asks if she can offer a hypothesis. The boy allows it. Luke suggests that his art is the ability to eliminate anything that threatens him. Lo finds the definition a bit vague, but she insists that looking at it that way, the description fits. The ability isn't invincible. It can only be used once, leaves him immobile and consumes a lot of energy, making the risk even greater. Setsu finally returns and apologizes for the delay. She comments that, as expected, the enemies won't reveal themselves voluntarily. Lo decides to remain vigilant. Suddenly, the car's lights go out completely. surprising everyone. Passengers wonder what happened and demand the blackout be fixed quickly. Lo understands this is their method for acting within the crowd. Setsu realizes they cannot react rashly. In the darkness, Thomas screams desperately, asking where his protectors are. Setsu yells for him to please be quiet. A surprise attack hits the knight squarely in the chest. She realizes they located Thomas by his voice. She tries to sense prana to find the enemy's position, but can't isolate them in the crowd. Lo approaches from behind and asks if he can make some light. Setsu agrees, but questions how he'll do it. The boy asks her to take care of Thomas and jumps up. He uses the ceiling as support to gain momentum. He releases a large amount of energy, illuminating the entire car. Passengers look up, and a child asks if it's some kind of performance. The knight notices the enormous amount of energy and yells for Lo to continue until power is restored. The swordsman confirms the request while locating one of the enemies in the crowd. Joman Teppo leaps toward him among the passengers. The assassin stares at him, identifying him as the source of that prana. Then he launches a direct attack against the train car. The blow hits its target, and the force of impact throws Lo backward. The boy recovers and assumes his combat stance. Joman faces him from the other side of the destroyed car. Axe in hand, the assassin asks if they should begin the monster hunt. Meanwhile, Setsu realizes they have been separated. An enemy attacks her in the darkness. She notices the blade is painted black. The knight understands the most skilled one went after Lo. The others were left for her. Setsu wonders if they are underestimating her capabilities. She dodges a kick attack from one man. She faces him with a determined expression. With a single blow, she defeats the aggressor, throwing him far away. Another attacker wonders what just happened. He questions if it was a bomb or some art that detonates prana. He remembers seeing that woman unsheath her sword. In a single instant, the swordswoman brandished her blade 3 times. The remaining aggressor watches her in the darkness, trying to understand what the points around her are. He realizes there is no prana fluctuation, and that prolonging the fight will only lead him into a trap. He decides he needs to end this before power is restored and advances to attack. Setsu explains that the heavy blade, Lotus, is a technique of accumulating cuts. The accumulated cuts explode when the last strike acts as a catalyst, but by retaining the strike that would serve as the catalyst, and by accumulating blows of identical power while maintaining balance, she prepares to release the technique. It is possible to create a slash bomb that hits the enemy all at once. With the enemies defeated, the knight asserts that the pinnacle of the Sword Saint style is the ability to do anything with a single strike. Even if a true successor exists elsewhere, she cannot yield this feeling. She declares that the only one who truly understands the style is her. In his training, Lo finally succeeds in swinging the rope. The rope stretches into a perfect straight line over the train's roof. Setsu congratulates him and tells him to remember that sensation. She explains the technique is called fluidity, and is rare among rankers of their level. When he completes it, he will be able to utilize his power even more effectively. The scene returns to the confrontation between Lo and Joman in the destroyed car. The two face each other at a distance, ready for combat. The swordsman prepares for the battle ahead. They then advance against each other at high speed. Their weapons clash in a violent impact. Joman is surprised and questions if his opponent can use fluidity. The assassin then releases his own power. With the release, he flings the youth to the other side of the car. Passengers panic and wonder if this is a fight between rankers. Joman praises Lo's promising future, saying it's almost a waste to break him. The boy stands up and admits his opponent is strong and a level above. He notices the assassin uses fluidity freely and wonders if he is from the upper echelon of Despada. Despite this, Lo understands he has no choice but to face him. He then prepares to use fluidity as well, but his attack fails, and the blow dissipates before reaching the target. The youth feels the impact of the error in his own body. Joman simply asks if the technique is incomplete. The assassin observes his adversary for a moment. He concludes it's a true waste. He notes Lo's miraculous prana capacity and reflects that someone should have taught him how to handle so much power. He wonders if the boy grew up in an environment that avoided fighting, wasting his talent. Joman concludes that if he is a monster inside a shell, he will be easy to take down, but it would have been problematic if his fluidity were complete. The two face off again, ready to continue combat. Lo understands that he now knows what his problem is. First, he cannot control fluidity, and second, the boy releases a burst of energy toward Joman. The assassin is surprised and asks if that's self-destruction. The second problem is that fluidity and the Sword Saint style do not connect. Lo realizes that, right now, he cannot use both techniques at the same time. Jomin jumps to dodge the attack and comments it's a waste to let a treasure like that rot. Then he throws his axe at his adversary. Lo manages to barely dodge the attack. The assassin advances and grabs the handle of his weapon in midair. He attacks the wall with the axe, creating debris. The fragments hit Lo squarely, distracting him. Jomin advances to deal another blow. The two clash once more in fierce combat. Lo realizes that at that angle, his sword will break. With a kick, he manages to pull away and create distance. He notes that the opponent is using his head, the strongest engage in a battle of wits. The swordsman remembers he has experience fighting stronger people, and that the sword saint style is always changing. He prepares to use one of his techniques. Then he advances and delivers the Gale X Lotus strike. Jomin recognizes the same technique as before and considers it foolish, but he is surprised when he is hit by the attacks. The high-speed blows are like bullets and accumulate wherever they touch. The assassin realizes he cannot dodge, but finds the attack too light. He states that with that power level, it doesn't matter how many times he's hit. Lo agrees the attack is light. The gale is quick, but each individual strike is weak and lacks the power of the lotus. But the swordsman asserts it's enough to pin the enemy's feet. He concludes that controlling just one blow isn't difficult. The assassin realizes the trap too late. Lo prepares his sword for the final attack. Then he advances and hits Jomin squarely with a single blow.